You know what's hot on YouTube right now? When people assemble a few of their videos together into a series and call it a marathon. And who am I to tell YouTube they're wrong? Maybe it's like an ASMR thing. You can listen to my relaxing, lovely voice. Unfortunately, I think there's some loud bits sometimes, so you may wake up. But either way, if you're leaving this on as you work from home, listening to me in your sleep, or some third thing I haven't thought of, please enjoy. Oh, cleaning. Maybe you're cleaning. This is a collection of my first 5 games that I've ranked in my series, Koobert Opens Worlds. We'll start off with Sony's The Getaway, the pandemic game, Mercenaries, Saints Row the Third, everyone's favorite open world game, Driv 3R, and finally, Grand Theft Auto 3. I've tweaked the first 3 a little and fixed a few errors. And here we go. What do you get when you combine Guy Ritchie-style cool English crime dramas, Driver, and a proto-GTA-style open world? You get The Getaway. Kinda. Oh. Hey, thanks for joining me on this premiere episode of Koobert Opens Worlds. I'm intending the Cow series to take a look back at the dominant genre of the 2000s, the open-worldy drivey-shooty game. I'm going to be pretty relaxed in what qualifies for the series, as seminal open-worldy drivey game Driver doesn't even have on-foot sections, or a map full of mission icons, and even The Getaway is too early to really be part of this formula. There's a lot of overlooked and interesting titles in this range, and as they all start creeping towards 20 years old, I figured, why not take a look back at this genre during its peak? Let's get started. Originally aiming to be a launch game, and a genuine bit of retaliation to the much-hyped Dreamcast title Metropolis Street Racer, Sony, Team Soho, and Brendan McNamara pitched The Getaway as a breakout launch tentpole release for the PlayStation 2. This didn't happen. As luck would have it, neither did Metropolis Street Racer on Dreamcast, which was still not available by the time of the launch of the PlayStation 2 on 26 October 2000 in North America, or 24 November 2000 in Europe. It turns out, even as a 5th gen, 6th gen, look, I'm old, and I don't know how kids count generations. At any rate, even as a 6th generation console, developing a detailed recreation of a modern city like London takes time, which led both MSR and The Getaway to miss their target release dates by literal years. MSR also had 2 other cities, but not to the level of detail which The Getaway captured London. The Getaway did finally come out in December 2002 in Europe and January 2003 in North America, and it was a day one purchase for me. College-age Koobert loved open worlds and detailed recreations of cities and the Guy Ritchie movies. However, reviewers gave this an average Metacritic score of 72, which is pretty harsh considering the curve on which video games are usually rated. The whole open-world crime game scene of late 2002, early 2003 looks very different than had the game released back in 2000. Team Soho very much emulates the mission structure of the original Driver combined with the innovative for the time on-foot combat mechanics. But one juggernaut release looms over The Getaway's final date: Grand Theft Auto 3. Heck, 2 juggernaut releases loom if you think about it. Grand Theft Auto Vice City released 2 months earlier, refining the look and style of the Grand Theft Auto series, and deepening the sheer amount of stuff you can do in it. But The Getaway was deep into its development by the time GTA 3 released. And while you can be sure they played and looked at GTA 3, there's definitely more structured and divided sense of gameplay flow. Like Driver before it, the game has missions progressing linearly, one after another. Heck, it doesn't even have the answering machine job selections of Driver 1. There's no driving around an open world map looking for work. To call it a Grand Theft Auto clone isn't really accurate, not only as it was in the works well before GTA 3, but also as it doesn't really take the general idea of a non-linear open world into account as you progress through missions. There is an open map, but whether or not you can navigate it as you please depends on the mission. Some missions allow a leisurely pace to reach your goals, others engage a very strict timer you can't actually see. This gets into a major design point of The Getaway: the lack of UI. There's no minimap, there's no map whatsoever, other than the one included in the box. and I think this was only included in the box for Black Monday. I genuinely can't remember. The game world is a semi-realistic map of London, somewhat compressed and missing much of its smaller streets, but the landmarks and main roads are in the correct places. With no compass or GPS telling you where to go, you have to solely rely on your knowledge of the city and the blinking turn signals to tell you where to go next. Even then, they more generally nudge you in the correct direction than giving you exact point-by-point turns. And following them at face value will end up with you driving the wrong way up a one-way street, which can be a problem. There's also no health bars, no damage meters for your car, no bullet counts. You can see the amount of health remaining based on the staggering of your character and the amount of blood on their clothes. And your car begins to steam from a broken radiator and then darkening smoke as it quickly approaches an engine fire. You pick up limited use weapons that just work until they don't, meaning that you have to have the general idea of how many bullets it has left in your mind as you use it. In execution, it's both interesting and frustrating. Honestly, the health, bullets, and car damage never are game-breaking or that bad. It does rely on a novel regenerating health mechanic that would in many ways be adopted by many action games to come. However, to do so requires you to lean against a wall and slowly recharge health as the blood stains on your clothes get slurped up. It's all in the name of immersion, and I guess it makes more sense than picking up Doom-style health packs. It also has a subtle element of music cues signaling that you're being pursued by one of the rival gangs, though the choice of some of these stings may be questionable, especially for the Jamaican and Chinese gangs.
Give it up!
Above all else, the game wants to be cinematic.
What happened to McCormack?
It does this through the use of well-directed cutscenes, photographs used for textures, detailed for the time facial and motion capture, and the screen left clear of UI elements. The push for games to be more like movies is a trend you'll see come back every so often. Cinematic storytelling was a goal from titles like Ninja Gaiden on the NES with its cutscenes, the simplified interface of Lucasfilm's Loom or Sierra's Manhunter New York, and taking over gaming in the mid-1990s with the Sillywood era of full-motion video games.
Need to wash our hands again.
There we go.
Wash.
Wash, wash. Rub-a-dub-dub. Dry the hands off.
My call sign, it's how I live, it's how I fly, because that's the name, come on around here, because that's the name of the tune, right?
Hey, maniacs.
Blair.
Oh my God. Colonel Blair,
nice meeting you.
Well, thank you.
Let me take your bag. Well, thank you very
Colonel
much.
Blair, sir. It's an honor, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Here.
Maybe she's not hungry.
Then there was Shenmue's production scope and its graphics, Metal Gear Solid and its sequels.
Behind D. Colonel, what's a Russian gunship doing here?
Through to the adventure gaming's renaissance in the 2010s of Quantic Dream, Telltale Games, and the Dark Pictures anthology.
Jason! Jason!
On a lot of levels, the Getaway succeeds. The cutscenes have a strong sense of camera placement and angles that are clearly inspired by filmmaking, and good filmmaking at that.
Now make your decision.
It makes the wise choice of staying in engine, Metal Gear Solid style, giving everything a coherent look. Compared with the overly wide-angled virtual lenses and floating cameras of many cutscenes of the era, things are more frequently shot with telephoto-style lenses and camera movements feel natural. As for the motion capture, you can see where Brendan McNamara was going with this, and how this is an immediate predecessor to his LA Noire developed with Rockstar Team Bondi.
I'm Officer Phelps, miss. I'm here about the shooting. Did you know the victim?
He was my boss.
While faces are big and chunky, they have realistic skin and blemishes, with early facial movement capture. It helps that the performances are, all around, good, too.
Morning, sunshine. Good to see you again. Do you sleep well? You look a little drowsy. Grievous, bring the boy around. I want his undivided attention.
LA Noire took it a step further with the power available on the next generation of machines, and even more detailed facial capture, leading the way for truly remarkable work in The Last of Us or Hellblade.
So is that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man,
Can't deny that view.
It's breathing. It's breathing. He knows she's getting closer. He can feel her coming closer. She's getting closer. They're watching.
This is a journey deep into darkness.
The Last of Us is an interesting touchstone for this game too. This was another Sony in-house production, and you can tell that what McNamara was aiming for was the truly cinematic blockbuster game style that would be what Sony exclusives in the future were known for, only 10 years earlier. The game pushes you immediately into the plot, barely introducing the lead, Mark Hammond, as his wife is fridged and his young son is kidnapped.
Zeus!
Idiots! Bloody amateurs!
Come on, get in the car, quick! Zeus!
You also get a taste of the kind of dialogue that this game will be inundating you with during its cutscenes. Fast-paced, a little cruel, and matter-of-fact. Unfortunately, this game does hit up a big pop culture block for me. I'm just not that interested in serious crime thrillers. I like my crimes goofy. I like my locks, stocks, and 2 smoking barrels. I like my pulps fiction. I enjoy a good crime caper with a hint of jokes and fun to go along with the medicine of seriousness. It's not to say that I can't appreciate the craft of an absolute classic like Goodfellas, but I'm not going to go out of my way to watch a Ray Donovan or, what's that one? Breaking Bad. But having already dipped my toe into a lot of different open world games for upcoming reviews and footage capture, I have to admit the writing is sharp. It is definitely steeped in English slang, featuring terms like claret, slag, slapper, ratchet and clank, topper, filth, DC, secret world of Alex Mack. Terms which may not be familiar to everyone, but you can figure them out through context clues. It's unfortunate that you don't really learn that much about Hammond going in, though the blanks are filled through incidental comments as you play. You learn that he has recently come out of a 5-year stint in jail for robbing a Ratchet and Clank. And now he's faced with a set of increasingly odious tasks to perform for local crime lord Charlie Jolson, all with the dangling carrot of getting his son back safe and sound. Hammond goes through some extreme lengths to do so, and every time the goalposts are set further back. The game does everything in its power to set up Jolson as a bad dude, even to the point of calling him a National Front member. He's the only one that really lets loose with the racial slurs as he attempts to instigate a race war between the rival gangs of the area. On a side note, there is one chapter where Hammond, his new ally Yasmin, and pretty much everyone have a weird loathing for a sex worker they need to pick up for Jolson.
Your man Colin seems to have hired some dancing slut. Goes by the name of Layla.
He wants me to grab some dancing slut named Layla.
Poor bitch.
Slag.
Alright, relax. She's a stripper. Don't worry about it. The bait and switch, do this and you get your son back jobs last for what seems like the majority of Hammond's story, right up until you reach Jolson's climactic finale boat. And then the game does something completely unexpected. It ends Hammond's story, and then swaps out protagonists for a character you have only recently just met, DC Frank Carter.
Do you want to stop that, little Hitler?
I know you. You're that copper from the prison van bust.
He's filth, Mark. Frank Carter of the Flying Squad.
At this point, you can continue with his own set of 12 missions, each happening concurrently with those of Hammond. It's a neat twist, though I do wonder if the repetitive nature of Hammond's missions might have worked better if they were mixed in throughout with Carter's. So how does the game play? Is it fun? This is a tough question when it comes to the Getaway, and this leads back to the mediocre scores it received at launch. In isolation, you can definitely show sections of the game which look almost modern in its pacing. The cover mechanics, the blind firing around corners, the explosions, the almost John Wick style of weapon swapping. When it works, it looks great. But what you see there doesn't show the sometimes literally dozens of attempts it can take me to get through a mission. With some games, like Driver 3 coming to mind in particular, these flavors of open world break down when they get on foot. Without a doubt, and coming a year and a half before Driver 3, this game's on-foot sections feel and play better. Now, whether or not they play better than Grand Theft Auto 3 or Vice City, that might come down to personal taste. I know that I've spent hours redoing missions before in both of those Rockstar games, particularly the last mission of GTA 3 and that one mall shootout in Vice City. But there are less missions in the Getaway, and most of them can be extremely frustrating. I spent, according to the in-game timer, 4 hours trying to complete the 20-minute final Hammond mission.
Fucking loser.
Fuck you, Hammond, I don't...
On foot, the controls are that of an early 2000s console game, before third-person action games really got their act together. Before Resident Evil 4, before The Matrix Path of Neo, and before Rocksteady's Batman Arkham Asylum, third-person action games were kind of all over the place. Controls weren't standardized and the control options were limited. And while it does have a reasonably good snap-to aiming that will only sometimes target a guy half a kilometer away and not the shotgun-wielding baddie who's 2 feet from you, the free aim is almost useless. For one, it's inverted left-stick aiming while you hold down the free aim button, kinda like GoldenEye. And it's not ADS or zoomed in, and the camera does not shift whatsoever. So it mostly feels like blind firing, especially with no on-screen reticle. Getting in and out of cover can sometimes be sticky, and there are moments where the game just doesn't respond to button inputs at all. One game that did do a very, very similar style of location and combat better, Max Payne, did release during development of this game, but sadly that doesn't seem to be an influence. Checkpoints are scarce, usually only at the end of a long drive. Further on-foot issues compound the frustration. Touching a moving car will immediately kill you, and the Getaway decides about 8 hours in to add some light platforming in the form of laser dodging, and Tomb Raider style shuffling around objects. Weirdly, these moments made me crave Tomb Raider's one square at a time grid-based tank controls, because those I can do. This is rough. But the frustration isn't limited to on-foot sections. Like the first 3 driver games, the Getaway's driving sections frequently have distance requirements and timers. Unlike Driver, they're invisible, so you'll very suddenly be confronted with game over screens. You can also be vague as to what you're supposed to be doing, such as one point where you have to take out a telephone company van so you can drive yours in to infiltrate a police station. Fun side note, in the original releases of this game, one of which I sadly used to have until I lent it to a friend who never gave it back, it was a blue British Telecom van, but they requested it be removed due to the violent nature of the mission in the game. It doesn't actually have on-screen prompts, and I didn't realize it was navigating me towards this van and not the police station. And even though it did pop up the failure state of "you lost the van," I wasn't sure what it meant by that, even though I had noticed a very prominent van at one point as I was doing the mission. This is a game that works best with walkthroughs, as the lack of UI can really hamper trying to figure out what the heck you're supposed to be doing. At any rate, these strict time limits for getting to one side of the city to the other can really be tight. There's one involving a prisoner truck that demands a perfect knowledge of routes and a lack of collisions. This is tough because unlike the paper-soft street lamps and fences of the Grand Theft Auto games, this more realistic open world contains a whole lot of bollards, fences, and bus stops that will bring your vehicle to a complete stop, and also, weirdly, deform them. Okay. Tangent time. The car selection is pretty neat in this game. I spent a couple of summers in England the years before this release, and its selection of cars really does do a good cross-section of the kind of vehicles you'll see if you time travel back to London in 2000, and hang out with me as I endlessly visit the Virgin Megastore and Tower Records. There's Toyota MR2s, TVRs, older and newer Saabs, the much-maligned Lexus LC430 Cabriolet and the LS400 sedan, the Nissan Micra, Renault Scenics, little Citroens and Peugeots, and gangs drive some really neat cars like the Nissan Skyline and Rover SD1. It's very unusual to see licensed cars like these get smashed and torn up. I also think that basing these on real-world locations allows them to use the real names of restaurants and stores, so you do see Starbucks, Virgin Megastore, Boots, Marks & Spencer, McDonald's, Burger King, and more. It warms my completely indoctrinated by corporate capitalism heart. The driving model itself is, it's okay. It uses the pressure-sensitive buttons that the PS2 controllers came equipped with, so really mashing down on the accelerator and brake do help you stop and go faster, but this is tricky. These cars clip, smash, and spin easily. Combine that with the impressive traffic density and narrow streets of London, and you have a world that's realistic to drive through, but not necessarily fun. Compare with Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City's world, which are much less realistic, much less dense, but also much more of a playground to zoom through. There are some jumps situated around the city, but they just aren't that enjoyable to use, unlike the addictive super jump mechanics of the Grand Theft Auto 3D games. Car chases come in two types, getting away from pursuit and ramming a target off the road. The former can be annoying and relies on two strategies, getting the pursuing car hung up on traffic or immovable objects, or getting out of the car and shooting whoever's chasing you, which is generally the easier of the two. Unfortunately, the police and rival gangs will pop up and start pursuit at random, though some of the time, driving around within legal limits in the correct lane will stealth you around police, unless they're in active pursuit of you. The gang cars will ruin that every time though, not only chasing you, but alerting all the cops in the area too. Ramming a target off the road is surprisingly tough as they can take a beating, ignore physics, and will frequently speed away from you for no reason. This is one area where Driver and Grand Theft Auto both have much more satisfying loop. Put Grand Theft Auto and The Getaway back to back though, and you can tell one thing. For being on the same hardware and within the same window of release, there's definitely something impressive about the realistic aims of The Getaway. It's often said in game nerd circles, and I say this as a complete game nerd, that realistic graphics age poorly, but I don't necessarily think that's the case. If it's realistic at the cost of good art direction, it's going to look worse than compared with games with good art direction that are indifferent about realism. But I think that England's overcast skies, the grimy back streets, the brick facades, and old architecture look great in The Getaway. At moments, the aim for realism are a marvel. I love, in the final rush to the climactic finale ship, that for once the sun is starting to rise over the city. The interiors, too, have a great sense of care in establishing a kind of pre-baked time of day, from the gloomy light streaming in through windows to the soft gray shadows in the corners. Compare this with Vice City and you'll get two different takes on how to show a city for a video game. Vice City is all about the flares, the sunsets, the fog, and the rain. The Getaway is about gritty details. You can like either, or both, or neither, but I'm on the side of coming back and enjoying the work put into The Getaway's realism, as well as the playful playground and colorful nostalgia of Vice City. I'll definitely have to come back and take a look at its direct sequel, The Getaway Black Monday, which I'm not entirely sure I ever finished, as well as the weirdness of the auteur-led LA Noire. If you've got any open-world games you want me to take a look at, let me know in the comments. I do have a preference for tackling those set in the 19th, 20th, or 21st century, though I might play a remaster of a sci-fi game or two. Alright, so I'm gonna try giving these things a score. I'm not gonna make a Metacritic total. For graphics, I'm giving this 5 Koobs. Story, 4 Koobs. Open world, 3 Koobs. On foot, 2 Koobs. And driving, 3 Koobs. It's a great looking game for the time. The story is well written, if maybe a little repetitive during the Mark Hamill sections. The open world is very detailed and cool to explore, but during the main game you actually do not get much of a chance to explore it, and it's only when you're playing free mode that you really can. On foot is the weakest part of the game, for sure. With driving being okay. It's good, but it's just a little frustrating given the nature of the city. Well, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and do all those bells and things. I don't know. I'm supposed to say that. See you next time. If I was a less scrupulous YouTube PNG, I'd say that Mercenaries, Playground of Destruction by Pandemic Studios was a secret gem of an open-world game that you never played. They love saying that kind of thing, but it's not true. According to MPD in February 2005, Mercenaries outsold the just-released Resident Evil 4 and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. So why is this game forgotten? Does it deserve to be? Hey, welcome back to Koobert Opens Worlds, where I review some of my favorite or most noteworthy open-world games. Mercenaries really does feel like a hidden gem. It dropped out of gaming consciousness right around the dissolution of Pandemic Studios, and younger players might have missed out on this one. So why has this game been forgotten? Part of it could be the looks. In spite of positive reviews on release praising its graphics, the N64-style fog, very limited draw distance, and simple landscapes and buildings belie the complicated game underneath. Look at Pyongyang. This looks like something out of a 90s 3D game like Blast Corps, with open lots, sparse building population, and basically no detail. There are some bright points, interiors look pretty great, and the character models themselves and their weapons and vehicles can be nicely detailed. Most of my footage throughout this review will be of the original Xbox version. The PlayStation 2 version is pretty similar, but without the anti-aliasing and a very, very limited implementation of what has to be the hotness of mid-2000s graphical effects, Bloom! Yep, you better be packed for your trip to Bloomsville. Like how brown environments were a graphical hallmark of late 2000 games, Bloom really reached its peak in 2005. With Mercs and games like Fable truly inheriting the Bloom crown. Look at that Fable Bloom. Bloom basically is a soft glow emanating from bright parts of your character, sort of a simulated pro-mist filter, which might be too ancient of a reference. So let's say it harkens back to the kind of glowing, soft faces caused by filters that were put on camera lenses to soften the detail and make people looking blurrier and thereby prettier, sort of getting rid of wrinkles was the basic idea, especially on television. So your PS2 version is crisper and maybe a titch more responsive, but sadly is also only outputting interlaced video. My vote, if you're going to play them, is for the Xbox version, but I know there's a big contingent of hatred against Bloom, so you might be happier on PS2. Now, unlike Blast Corps and the open world games of the late 1990s, in this 2005 game, the buildings are completely destructible. Okay, wait. They also were in Blast Corps, yes, but this time they have Havoc physics. And not the buildings themselves, but there's Havoc physics in the game. And that was a real buzzword of the mid-2000s. Another one. Havoc Physics was a middleware software suite that helped add rigid bodies, ragdoll physics, and advanced collision detection. It was the hotness of 2004-2005. Let's roll that beautiful physics footage. So what other games were part of this Havoc hotness push? PsyOp, the Mindgate Conspiracy? Havoc. Look at those barrels! And the ragdolls everywhere! Half-Life 2? Havoc. The whole idea of the gravity gun was based on having fun with physics. And heck, a lot of the game, even before you get that gun, is based on figuring out physics puzzles. Halo 2? You bet there was Havoc. So much smashy and crashy. And maybe the most game-changing use of Havoc physics, it's gotta be The Elder Scrolls 4: Oblivion. Physics made this game incredible. And super broken, but incredible. And hey, Bloom!
What kind of deal can I make for you today?
So Mercenaries, which I do want to call Mercs, but that might be confusing, so let's get it straight that I'm not referring to the Capcom game. Although if I was referring to the Capcom game, I'd note how it actually was a direct sequel to Commando, and that got renamed out west. Mercenaries' graphics were toned down to make room for the vast amount of interactivity and physics. But it can still be kind of pretty in places. Mostly inside, but still. The sound, though, is pretty uniformly great. LucasArts games have always put special attention to their soundtrack, and Mercenaries has an incredible orchestral score that moves from the somber to heroic. It's a co-creation between Michael Giacchino, who composed the main theme, and his frequent collaborator, Chris Tilton, who handled the majority of compositions, weaving the Giacchino theme as a motif throughout. There's some awesome use of Korean barrel drums, and surprisingly thoughtful, quiet themes that are just awesome. Another element of the soundscape are factions that speak in their native languages, with subtitles only being available if your chosen player character understands what they're saying. The subtlety of how this is used is impressive and surprising. But you're here for the destruction, and the destruction serves the gameplay in a neat way. While the building explosions are mostly canned animations, the damage to buildings and other targets can be done in a whole host of ways. So let's talk about what this game is, how it plays, and how the mission design works. It's the near future, 2007. North Korea's leadership has been taken out in a coup by General Choi Song, leading to a total free-for-all as nations vie for control of this key peninsula. 5 factions are in contention. North Korea under Song's leadership, the Allied Nations, a United Nations stand-in under the control of the US military, South Korea with its army being advised by a CIA operative, the Chinese military led by Colonel Peng, and the Russian mob controlled by a unique individual, Sergei, and his actually in control second-in-command, Joseph. You choose control of one of 3 main characters: Jennifer Mui, a former MI6 operative who left for the more lucrative option of being her own boss; Matthias Nilsson, a violence-loving feral man with a love of weapons, destruction, and who has 0 sense of self-preservation; and finally Chris Jacobs, a friendly ex-soldier with a serious nihilist streak. Each one has their pluses and minuses. Jennifer Mui has an easier time with sneaking. Chris Jacobs takes more damage, and I don't know, maybe Matthias does more damage with guns or something. That one I'm not so sure. Obviously, I went for Jennifer, #girlboss, #laptop lifestyle, #bossbitch, #honestly-slay. Though the choice of main characters doesn't actually change much, it does add incidental dialogue with Fiona and different quips in different situations. Oh, and I haven't done it myself, but as this is a LucasArts game, you can also unlock Han Solo and Indiana Jones. Dang it, I want to get those. Oh, but there's a celebrity cast too. Peter Stormare, best known for his role in Until Dawn, plays the Swedish mercenary. Hollywood actor James Hong is the Chinese leader, Colonel Zhu Peng. The Allied nations are under the command of Carl, "You've got a stew going," Weathers.
Baby, you got a stew going.
The CIA agent Mitchell Buford is played by that one guy, Bruce McGill, who's in everything. And you've also got beloved voice actors like Phil Lamar and Jennifer Hale as Chris Jacobs and Jennifer Mui, respectively.
Your offer of aid was but wind and air.
Keep your 50 million. Info's on a need-to-know basis, Presley.
How this plays out is you get access to an open-world map. Second map opens halfway through the game, with Grand Theft Auto-style mission markers, and you need to weave through fights between the various factions as you navigate and try to accomplish missions. The only faction you can't work for is the obviously evil general controlling North Korea. They will always kill you on sight. Unless, of course, you nab one of their vehicles while no one is looking, but we'll get back to that in a bit. It's in the playing of these missions that the specialness of Mercenaries reveals itself. The game's subtitle Playground of Destruction refers to the open nature of tackling objectives and a variety of solutions you can employ. Your toolbox is full of things to use. You can hijack any vehicle in the game, including airplanes, tanks, helicopters, and missile launchers. The game doesn't wipe its vehicles off the board when you start a job, so if you've parked an attack helicopter next to the mission giver, it'll be there when you come out. There's also the Merchant of Menace, the menu-based weapon, ammo, and vehicle and attack vendor you can access from your very 2005 PDA. When I say attack, I mean it. As you progress through the game, you unlock everything from artillery cover to a deep burrowing bunker buster bomb, and the game won't limit how many you can use during a mission if you can cover the cost. And some jobs will give you a free delivery or two of vehicles, or artillery fire, or a covert ammo and weapons package, among other things. Sometimes these bonus giveaways at the start of a mission are key to finishing it, the end of Act 1 Bunker Buster being one example. For the most part, you can keep using these deliveries after you run out of the freebies, but you will have to pay for it. Also, the Merchant of Menace is part of the Russian Mafia faction, so if you're on bad terms with them, you're cut off from the store. There's also the stealth factor, but it's not the usual hidey kind of stealth. It's more of a hitman thing, except your clothes is cars. The game has faction AI, and factions have differing relationships with each other. Everyone is hostile towards North Korea, South Korea and the Allied nations are friendly, and everyone else is kinda somewhere in between. You can take advantage of this by hijacking the vehicles of different factions and sneaking around without being attacked, as well as using them to drive inside restricted faction areas. However, faction officers, denoted with a little flag icon above them, will be able to see through these disguises, so you have to navigate pretty carefully around them if you don't want to blow your cover. In a mission where, say, you have to destroy a building, you have several ways to handle this. You can go on foot and set C4 charges around the building. You could order or steal a tank and blast it from the ground. You could even hijack an attack helicopter and rain explosions from down below. You just gotta look out for those SAMs and their missile strikes.
999, oh, you can eat lobster. The missile strikes destroy the helicopter.
You can also use laser or satellite-guided systems to call a strike down on the target safely from the hills half a kilometer away. You might ask, why don't you do this every time? Because they get really, really expensive, and using one could easily wipe out a big chunk of your finances. Another gameplay hook is the Deck of 52, inspired by the invasion of Iraq. Sung's generals and other allies are assigned to a deck of cards by their importance, and each chapter of the game deals with a different suit. These folk can be captured alive or dead, and while the process of incapacitating them isn't that well done, you just run up and hit X or square, the real challenge is getting their tied up selves over to the waiting helicopter. The helicopter is not invincible, and neither is the general, so you're better off saving them for last so the ride or the general isn't exploded. Let's take a look at one of the more interesting missions in the game, a series of assassinations requested by the Russian Mafia. It brings up a series of 4 targets to kill, and in tilting its hand a little, gives you a sniper rifle at the start.
If you can finish this job quietly. Joseph just gave you access to a support item he thought you might find useful. I've identified the allied officer for you. Looks like he's giving a press conference. Don't let the journalists see you take him out.
The first target is an allied nation's general, which is pretty surprising for a mainstream game. It's emphasized in emails that he's corrupt, but this is one of the few times where the game really underlines the moral ambiguity of both your main character and XOps as a whole. XOps is a PMC after all.
PMCs. Private military companies.
That's right. PMCs have no basis in nations or ideologies. They are private enterprises, driven by profit.
There's a bonus for completing assassinations quietly, which I've never been able to do. You can still complete the scenario even being spotted, you just miss out on a bonus. If you happen to have a helicopter before beginning the mission, it's way easier. You can just fly on top of buildings, land on the roof and snipe, but you could just as easily launch an RPG at them and call it a day. In this run I had tackled it on foot and by car, and sadly I guess I was caught sniping at the prisoner in the guard. On the other hand, I did do a much better job of sniping the Chinese officer in his tank, so yay!
That was the last target. Mission bounty is being transferred as we speak.
Extended missions like these really show off the best of Mercenaries, as well as one of my annoyances with the game. It really could use a checkpoint system, as you're redoing a good 10 to 15 minutes if you fail any steps of this plan, and some of the longer missions can reach up to half an hour. The end of chapter scenarios especially could use checkpoints, as they're all multi-step affairs that take place on a bespoke mission area, so you don't get the same access to previously stolen or purchased vehicles. They're a controlled scenario with limited resources, though again you have access to anything on the Merchant of Menace menu. The further you get into the game, the more missions rely on signal blockers to stop you from calling in strikes when you're close to a target, requiring you to handle things on your own or take out the frequency jammers. Outside the story mission, there isn't a GTA San Andreas level side activities, but frankly, that's okay. The hidden crates of stolen artwork and hijacked technologies give tangible rewards, and for the most part are where you think they would be, odd areas on the map and in back alleys. You can even unlock the real Hummer H3, which has some of the best off-road mobility in the game, but realistically can't survive any kind of heavy weapons attack, so it's just a civilian car. It also has the benefit of disguising you as a civilian. So there's that. You also have checkpoint races, which tend to be between points you're going to go to anyway, and the occasional kill or disable all the soldiers in the area ones, which aren't that great, especially given how navigating tight areas is not the game's strong suit when it comes to camera and controls. The game really is at its best when you're inside a vehicle, not when you're on foot. Another fun set of bonus collectibles are destroying all the propaganda statues and listening devices. The statues in particular are really satisfying to explode. Other things the game doesn't get quite so right? Sneaking doesn't do much. Enemies can see you very easily almost all the time. I think that an extra layer of stealth would have given another avenue for resolving scenarios, and it seems like something that would add a lot to the gameplay. Vehicle controls are deliberately slow, with tanks and trucks taking effort to navigate around the map. To me, this isn't an issue, but my friend RJ described trying to control the game's vehicles as steering a shopping cart, and he gave up after an hour. Mercenaries' legacy can be seen in games influenced by its style. Much of its systems, especially the factions and infiltration, were used by Pandemic in the maybe actually hidden gem The Saboteur, and the Just Cause series. Well, you can't forget Red Faction Guerrilla, which took physics-based destruction to the next level with crumbling buildings and actual physics tied to their destruction. Beams, doorways, taking out towers and pillars by breaking one side, that sort of thing. Nothing made sense has come close to matching it. But what about Mercenaries' own sequel, Mercenaries 2 World in Flames? Surely a next-generation version will continue all the things I loved about the game, like the deep faction system, nuanced use of multiple languages, infiltration, and stealth. Sophisticated enemy AI and a moody, somber tone spiked with action, right? Right? Hey, where's everyone going? Okay, to be completely honest, I hadn't played Mercenaries 2 since 2008. Back then I found it incredibly disappointing, although when capturing footage for this video, I did boot it up again and thought to myself, okay, this is better than I remember. Look at the way the trees respond to explosions. I also figured as I was editing this video I should add a note warning people against trying the game on 360 via its original Xbox backwards compatibility feature, so I set that up to capture. Originally it was locked to 4x3 and it was so unstable it was virtually unplayable, but now it runs in 16:9 and smoothly? Huh. Then I also realized Mercenaries is backwards compatible on the Series S-X system, running in 4K and, well, not 60 FPS all the time, but definitely most of the time. Now, I'm not a game programming man, but I've watched enough Digital Foundry to pretend to be able to tell you that this game starts to chug anytime there's a lot of alpha effects on the screen. But still, this is the way to play it, and I feel real dumb only realizing this was available a couple of days ago. So in case you couldn't tell, I do really like this game. But Cow is all about the signs of the numbers, right? So let's do it. Let's put some numbers on it. Graphics. 3 cubes. Even for the era, the fog and simple city models aren't great, even if the character and vehicles are pretty detailed. Story, 5 cubes. Likeable characters, good performance, and fun dialogue go a long way to making this one of the better written open world games out there. Open world, 4 cubes. The open world is a key element of gameplay, and the game takes advantage of having a broad range of options for solving missions. On foot, 3 cubes. This is one game where you want to spend as much time in vehicles as possible. I mean, running around on foot isn't bad. It's pretty standard for that kind of third-person shooter of the time. Like, think of the Star Wars Battlefront games from that era. The controls are fine, aiming is fine, but I do wish that it had a bit better maneuverability in camera for tight quarters. Driving, 4 cubes. Now, this doesn't have the fun vehicle controls of something like Saints Row, but blasting through enemies with a tank is addictive as heck, and has some of the best controlling air vehicles of any open world games. Final score? 19 out of 25, making Mercenaries our current #1 open world game, out of 2. But still, USA! 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 So thanks for sticking with me for this second episode of Koobert Opens Worlds. Next time, we'll be taking a look at Saints Row 3 and Saints Row 2022. It's going to be a bit of a twofer. If you do like this video, give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe too, and if you really want to hear me talk about lots of RPGs of the Western and Japanese variety, feel free to follow my podcast, Square Roots, the classic RPG podcast, where me and a bunch of my buddies, Vanessa, Matthew, and Jim, discuss and play through an RPG a chunk at a time, and it's pretty silly, so why don't you check that out? Goodbye, and I love you. Platonically.
Roger, target received. Bombs free.
Has there ever been a piece of media about criminals just having fun? Just having a good time, no final punishment for their deeds, just, enjoying being criminals with their friends. Certainly not Grand Theft Auto. Everyone's miserable and people are yelling at you literally all the time. Scarface? No, he doesn't even get to hang out with his little friend. The Sopranos? The guy is in therapy.
What kind of mental stuff would cause a backache?
For conversation's sake?
Absolutely.
No, this kind of story is its own thing. This is Big Money Hustlers.
Bring back this money. Bring back this money. Bring back this money. Bring back this. Shut up!
Or Saints Row the Third. This week on Koobert Opens Worlds, we stick with Saints Row the Third, and definitely not Big Money Hustlers.
Man, if any one of y'all weasel-faced lobsters try to put y'all claws on this motherfucking money, I'ma fuck you up. Show you right.
COW is a completely objective, mathematical ranking of every open-world game I feel compelled to try out. Why start with the third Saints Row, you ask? It wasn't even my first entry point to the series. My very first Bears and Games video was the then-new 2008 Saints Row 2. And I've done a quick video on Saints Row 3 before. No, I think it's because it's peak Saints Row. It's not my favorite Saints Row, and Saints Row 2 has a better character creator. But Saints Row the Third hit in the exact right moment to break big. It's telling that it's the only one, so far, to get a real next-generation remaster. And the remaster is a genuinely great way to play the game. It has all the graphics. They didn't so much splash a new coat of paint onto Steelport, but instead splash it with shadows and darkness, deep puddles, neon lights, and all the physically based material rendering that you can stuff into a hat, which is a lot if it's a very big hat. Let's start with two things. What is Saints Row the Third, and how does it fit into the pop culture landscape of the time? Saints Row the Third, released in 2011, is the third entry in a series of open-world action games by Volition that burned brightest on the 7th generation of consoles. Saints Row 1, which I played for the first time capturing footage for this very video, was the first open-world game for the Xbox 360, launching in August 2008. The first two games chronicled the rise, fall, and rise again of the 3rd Street Saints in the city of the sorta Chicago, sorta Detroit Stillwater. By the point that you start Saints Row the Third, the gang has conquered the city and become a media sensation. They sold out, taken control of the Old Tour Corporation, and they love it. People enjoy getting robbed by them. They're still bloodthirsty killers, of course, but they're the fun kind, and no one really seems that upset by the trail of bodies they leave behind. After a heist gone kinda wrong, they end up on a plane over Steelport, parachute out of the back, smash through the plane again, parachute again, and land on the street needing to start from scratch. It's a great opening. Saints Row, unlike the Grand Theft Auto series, features the same cast of characters and, more importantly, the same main character through each of the original 4 games. And this person, the boss, can be anyone. They could be young, old, and in 2008, their gender was literally on a slider. They could be fat, slim, muscular, bearded. The variety of cosplay and fursuits pushes this even further. And as the series expands, the variety of voices does too. While the game doesn't have much in the way of dialogue selections, each has a bit of their own edge and attitude as well. Even the generic Troy Baker option.
Everywhere I go, if there's money involved, I'm in.
Also note, in Saints Row 4, you can literally select your personality to be Nolan North, the voice actor. A fun play on his being cast in pretty much everything back in 2013. It leans heavily into the history you've got with your crew. The same from the first 2 games. Pierce, played by Arif S. Kitchen,
That's a little big for
Shaundi, Danielle Nicolette, and Johnny Gat,
Actually, I wonder why my foot's not up your ass at this point.
lost Daniel Day Kim,
Dude, stop! No, just pee on it, man. You need to pee. Pee on it.
아니야, 바보야.
Pee on my foot. I'll lose. Just do it. I'll lose my foot if you don't. Just.
and introduces new group members like FBI agent Kinsey, Natalie Lander,
Someone who just got out of captivity would want to live it up a little more.
Not really. I hate people.
Sasha Grey as Viola,
They came highly recommended.
and a surprisingly good Hulk Hogan as the disgraced wrestler Angel.
You're ready to face Killbane, but the luchadors must still be dealt with.
Like Grand Theft Auto, you're dumped on a city map with icons to pursue, but the actual story missions themselves are on the phone.
Pierce, we've waited long enough. Now we go for Loren.
It won't be easy.
In Saints Row, the map is focused on acquiring territory from rival gangs, like in GTA San Andreas, and activities. While the game starts out with bespoke story missions like the bank robbery, many throughout the 25 or so hour campaign serve more as introductions to new activities with unique setup and voiceover. At a budget guessed to be around a third of that of something like Grand Theft Auto 4, released 3 years earlier, you can see they didn't have the cash for expensive cinematic journeys through each story mission. Though they're punctuated with these every so often, with major story beats getting their own levels and scenarios, mostly you're on the map doing one of these mainline activities. What makes Saints Row the Third such a breakout hit for the series, though, is it's the installment where they really just got goofy and weird. It is so much a relic of a specific point of time in pop culture that I'm not sure how this game will read for younger gamers. Grand Theft Auto 5 seems timeless, whether I like the story or not aside, because it really does work as a Great Recession time capsule. It seemed like a period piece, and the period was when it came out. Saints Row the Third, meanwhile, is an encapsulation of the epic bacon humor of the late 2000s to early 2010s. What do I mean by this? Let's consult Koobert's big old comedy timeline. We'll quickly scrub past the neurotic auteur and countercultural geniuses of the 1970s to early 80s, past the Dennis Miller boomer-ass holery that made up a lot of the 1990s, and even through the bro comedy of Dane Cook and misunderstanding Dave Chappelle that happened back in the early 2000s.
One of the baddest motherfuckers of all time. One of the best singers, one of the best looking motherfuckers you've ever seen. Hold my drink, bitch.
You walk up to any chick, lick the whole side of their face, man.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
While there are elements of the hookers and blow as a punchline that shows up around the edges of Saints Row the Third, this game leans hard into memes and the kind of positive, epic, superfluous pop culture that really defined the era.
Clarence is bore snore. Ted, tonight we're gonna go out. We're gonna meet some ladies. It's gonna be legendary. Phone 5.
Nyan Cat, Impact Font memes, and the whole I Can Has Cheeseburger site. Internet memes before Palmer Luckey paid the worst people in the world to make them exclusively for your conservative aunts and uncles. Saints Row wants to be in on the joke with you and tries hard not to just repeat memes. Does it work? Surprisingly, at least for me. A man who calls himself Gen X because of being born in the last couple of years of the 70s, but probably qualifies more as an elder millennial. For the most part, yeah. The game sometimes hits on a genuine sense of cool, like the sequence set to Kanye West's Power.
I've got to start thinking through these plans.
To scenes that use music to establish the relationships between characters, like when everyone's singing along to Sublime's What I Got.
And I can still get high. I can play the guitar like a motherfucking riot.
You get a sense of their history. They're around the same age and were really into Sublime. And they're comfortable enough to be vulnerable and goofy together. It's great. The boss is both a murderous psychopath, but also shown to be genuinely caring for the emotional state and welfare of his friends.
A conversation like this.
Totally agree. We should be using like that Navajo code dialect.
Come up for air. I took care of the Deckers.
Sure. Let down your guard and suddenly they make it look like you're selling secrets to Mossad and moonlighting as a dominatrix. We've created a big enough disruption for you to move on Matt Miller. But if you want the Deckers gone, like really gone, there's a lot of work to do.
All right. I'll hit you up if I need more help.
Remember, throw out your phone.
And this being mapped to your choice of character can be downright sweet. I've never seen a big old bear guy be this cute and sweet and delightful in a game like this before. And I can't fault any game that leans into the Jim Steinman well to pull out Holding Out for a Hero. Objectively, a perfect song.
On my way.
So steeped in 2011 that still seem to work in spite of themselves. There's the kinda sorta wacky Japan humor of Professor Genki's super ethical reality climax, which puts the player in a bizarre reality game show where you kill for prizes. But other than some of the phrasing and Japanese language elements, it comes off as more of a pastiche of The Running Man than Takeshi's Castle or other Japanese extreme survival game shows. Plus, the vaguely ominous nature of Genki himself and the fursuited contestants not being particularly insulted or displayed as weird, for the most part, gives this more of a laugh with than laugh at feeling, at least to me. Though somewhat unrelated, you can rescue someone being hounded by a furry gang as a random encounter while exploring the map, and even that never calls them freaks or weirdos, just they're presented matter-of-factly. Zemos, as played by Alex Dessert, really skirts the line between bro humor and epic bacon humor.
It's a rescue, right? This ain't some elaborate setup for a gangbang.
Why you gotta put that image in my head, bro?
He's a pimp who has an auto-tune mic attached to his cane. Sometimes it works. I just love how outright doofy having an auto-tune companion is, and his dialogue can be great. But his house full of, as he calls it, bitches feels, well...
What's this? Mr. Franklin's lonely. There's only...
Sorry, Daddy.
What do you mean sorry, Daddy? What the hell did you... Is Wayne Brady gonna have to choke a bitch?
Okay, admittedly, I still really like that sketch, but there's that kind of bro-y sex revulsion that ages badly, and it's here. The game constantly associates BDSM and kink with a lack of consent. You rescue Zemos, who has only been used as a human horse for years. Dildos are hilarious, because why would anyone ever use one? Unless they're gay, or have a butt or a vagina that they enjoy using it with. Can you even imagine? Hilarious! Now, genuinely, I'm not here to yuck your humor, young. If you dig that kind of stuff, well, there's plenty of it here. And the early Saints Row games can really hit that beat too. But it's interesting to see the series oscillate between bro humor and meme epic bacon humor, trying to find its voice. And unlike Borderlands 2, which at some moments uses claptrap to grind the game to a halt to scream double rainbows or make you fight some Ninja Turtles.
Oh, double rainbow, full on, all the way. Oh, perfect double rainbow, all the way. Oh, what does it mean? What does it mean? Oh, double rainbow.
It's surprisingly light on reference humor. Please note, I also still really like Borderlands 2. Sometimes its treatment of sex workers are fine. The escorts you help liberate from abusive pimps appreciate it, and have a surprisingly diverse range of bodies and features. And the rubber bondage suit you can get that probably meant was a hilarious joke at least looks good on a beefy bear. But the mission The Hobo, about a bunch of sexy women sexily human trafficked in a sexy cargo container that you can sexually recruit or sexily sell to someone else, just doesn't feel great.
You want out of here, you get in the crate!
I've been in there so long already!
Unlike the Grand Theft Auto radio stations, which by 4 and 5 were so sneeringly unfunny I kept them off, I actually enjoy the writing of the DJ banter and even the weird Adult Swim channel that features some Tim and Eric stuff.
Tom, can we get some food in here? I'm starving, man. I know you're not a waiter. I'm just asking a question. No, I don't think you're a waiter. That's just stop. That's a long way to go to be sarcastic, Tom. Wow. All right, for those of you listening, Tom just put on a waiter apron and got out a pad and pen.
What about the game itself? Is it pretty? Is it fun? Does it play well? Pretty, for me at least, is an easy yes, in both the for the time sense of the original PC, 360, and PS3 release, and in the current sense of the remastered version. The original game was shockingly good looking for the 360, especially compared with the less impressive technology Saints Row 1 and 2 ran on. There's a lot of physics going on, my favorite as you may know by now, and scenes like the vault heist and ditching the plane look downright great. The downside is that they're pushing a lot on these consoles, and the game's frame rate easily dives in more intense scenes. Even at the time, for Saints Row 3 and especially 4, I remember Vinny Caravella and the Giant Bomb crew all recommending, if you could, to try that on the much more powerful PC hardware that was available at the time. But even then it was still playable. Going back now, there's a certain looseness to the sticks that feels off, but the cars feel comparatively light and zippy in the face of bouncing, soft-sprung boats of Grand Theft Auto 4. That was always something I heard at the time from fans of the Saints Row series. The cars drove the way they wanted video game cars to drive, while the cars in Grand Theft Auto 4 floated and pitched and took so long to break that the game felt like it was either punishing you or trolling you. 12 years later, we can see that GTA 4 was really trying to replicate the ruined suspension and weak brakes of a worn-out, floaty American sedan, and they doubled down on that, making games deliberately awkward to control with GTA 5 and the Red Dead series. You know, for realism! The remastered version plays great, at least on PC. Support for high frame rates and super wide monitors, and being light enough on system requirements that I can easily skirt around the 120s most of the time, feels pretty great. Controls feel tighter, and driving has that kind of drift that feels more like the excellent car controls from Saints Row 2022. Cars are almost always just for getting to place quickly. There's very few pursuits or takedowns needed. And when a mission does require you to use a vehicle, they almost always give you something great, like a VTOL or a tank. One feature that sounds downright terrible, but works, is the awesome button. L1 or LB works as a kind of modifier on moves, turning a simple carjacking into a Dukes of Hazzard window entrance, or even dive bombing through the windshield. It also spices up hand-to-hand combat and turns melee into a series of incredible wrestling-inspired takedowns. So given the Saints Row games are based around completing side activities, how are they in Saints Row the Third? Mayhem is mayhem, just like the Grand Theft Auto series. It gives you a different selection of weapons with infinite ammo, and a time limit to do a certain amount of damage. Depending on what weapons you get, the difficulty can swing wildly. It's very easy to blow up tons of stuff with a rocket launcher, but with grenades on a strict time limit, it gets hard. Fortunately, damage not only includes people and vehicles, but also fences, bus stops, and garbage cans, so with careful aiming and moving to new zones constantly, you can build up a good combo. Tank mayhem is the same as above, but in a tank. No matter what the goals are, it's going to be pretty easy. Escort missions place you as a driver in a limo that is trying to avoid press cars and let the backseat occupants have noisy sex in peace. It's okay. Tiger Escort is a fun one. Hulk Hogan's Angel believes you need to learn courage, and the best way to do so is to drive around with a tiger in the car, and not letting the tiger get annoyed by crashing too much. The complication is that the tiger will randomly bat at you, causing you to lose control of the car. It's more fun than it sounds. Heli Assault is an escort quest. The real kind of escort quest, where you fly over your friends as they accomplish goals in a heavily armored helicopter, keeping them safe from enemies. These are definitely satisfying in a mercenary sort of way. You're overloaded with firepower, and blasting bad guys from above is a lot of fun. Guardian Angel works similarly, but this time you're on a rooftop or helicopter armed with a sniper rifle or rocket launcher, taking out bad guys to protect your buddy. It's totally fine. Trailblazing is a lot of fun. You're in a fire protection suit, and you're also on fire, driving an ATV, doing a checkpoint race as you get bonus time for running over people, setting them on fire, and exploding cars. It's a real PS2 era open world minigame gimmick, but I like it. Insurance fraud is a Saints Row classic. Your goal is to set up elaborate accidents, where using a Burnout-style aftertouch, you guide your ragdolled body from car to car, generating combos and gaining meter, which when full allows you to control your corpse better. It's great. Snatch and trafficking are the least interesting activities, with Snatch working as a sort of pimp choplifter. You attack violent pimps and rescue their sex workers under a strict time limit. Trafficking has you protect a dealer as a passenger, intervening when deals go wrong or they get cops or rival gangs after them. Neither is particularly enthralling. Cyberblazing is a Tron-like virtual reality motorcycle racing game, using the scenario that your racing is actually defeating firewalls and infiltrating the Deckers networks. Finally, there's the aforementioned Professor Genki's Super Ethical Reality Climax, a sort of run-based game show where you try to hit a prize money goal while avoiding furry assailants. It's so good, and so strange, that it spawned its own DLC with its own set of activities. Yarngasm is the best of the bunch, basically a combination of mayhem activities, but featuring a big ball of yarn crashing through the street. Think of it as a kind of destructive Katamari Damacy.
Right you are, Bobby. Genki Bowl fans everywhere, we're given a real treat here today.
There's also diversions around the map and in your phone, like vehicle thefts, gang operations, survival phone calls, and base jumping. I didn't do a ton of these. Given the premise that you're arriving into Steelport for no particular reason, the first act gives you the goals to build up a gang presence in the city while researching the Syndicate and Philippe Laurent, an evil Belgian.
These visions are Viola and Kiki, and I am Philippe Laurent, chairman of a multinational organization called the Syndicate.
Weirdly, this gets resolved at the end of Act 1, and Act 2 is devoted to dealing with the remaining gangs in the area. The Luchadors are a bunch of big beefy wrestle boys, the Deckers are basically DedSec from the Watchdog games, and the Morning Star are ultra-professional gang of sexy ladies and human traffickers. You recruit a big beefy friend named Oleg, who is completely nude while being introduced, as well as the FBI agent Kinsey, the pimp Zemos, disgraced wrestler Angel de la Muerte, and Viola de Winter, Lauren's former right-hand woman. Angel and Viola both have very personal grudges against the leader of the Luchadors, Killbane. By Act 3, the antagonist has switched to STAG, a sort of paramilitary SWAT organization that uses futuristic late G.I. Joe-style weapons.
To protect America, a top-secret team creates the battle vehicles of the future. We're in real trouble here, Hawk! I'm calling in Battle Force 2000! Battle Force 2000! Secret Force of G.I. Joe!
While there's nothing really pressing about the stakes as the story goes on, it's overall fine and more wrapping for giving context to your silly adventures. While missions focused on introducing activities make the majority of story missions in the game, some of the unique ones are great. The opening bank robbery to plane escape is a memorable and bonkers half hour. The Act 2 wrestle finale is a perfect encapsulation of the best this game has to offer, with a full-on quick-timey wrestling match featuring twists and turns. And while a zombie invasion with a cringe-worthy 80s celebrity cameo might sound like a terrible turn of events in peak 2011 pop culture, it's still pretty fun. The game doesn't take itself that seriously, and I mean that in a great way. During my original playthrough in 2011, my favorite mission by far was the virtual reality romp Deckers Die, which has you fight through a distorted neon computer reality with a Mega Man-style blaster, while at times also either being a blow-up doll or a toilet. Nothing really stands out character-wise about the main group of protagonists. I've never been particularly attached to Shandy or Pierce, and Johnny Gat was more annoying in Saints Row 2 than anything else. They're okay. The banter between all of them is good, and perhaps if I played Saints Row 1 before this I might be more attached, but the more goofy side characters have enough weird about them to be more appealing. On the other hand, there's the classic nerd archetype Jimmy Torbenson, who stars in his own DLC The Trouble with Clones, and he just sucks. He's both a Revenge of the Nerds style stereotype with a speech impediment, and an unpleasant mocking of fans of the game with nerdy interests in general. Given how great most of the other side characters are, it's just weird that they thought this guy was good enough to get his own DLC. Given the fan outcry about the 2022 Saints Row game being a reboot that ditches the original storyline and cast of characters, you'd think this game was embraced by Saints Row fans. Certainly I was excited for it after, for the most part, enjoying Saints Row 2, and it was only narrowly beaten out for Giant Bomb Game of the Year by Skyrim. But in my researching this video, there was a certain amount of backlash to the title for being sillier, shorter, having less customization options, and for the new city feeling lifeless and boring. It's always interesting to go back and look at reviews of the time to games that are now thought of as beloved classics before the overall gamer hive mind has achieved consensus on it. But what do I think about Saints Row the Third? Obviously it's time for some math. And some ranking. In this case, we'll review the remastered version on PC and consoles as the point of reference. I'll check out the Switch version in a separate short video. Graphics? 5 Koobs. A gorgeous game, even with the bones of a 2011 title underneath it. The lighting, materials, and textures are fantastic. And being based on an older game, it means that it performs well in a variety of systems, even with the shiny new look. Story? 4 Koobs. Though the main cast is a little bland and the story doesn't have a ton of dramatic momentum, the writing is sharp and the performances from all the voices of the boss to Sasha Grey and Hulk Hogan are surprisingly good. It keeps you chuckling throughout, and the willingness to go off the rails works in its favor. The only real black mark against the writing are the occasional regressive attitudes towards women, BDSM, and sex work, and the weird shadiness to its fans in the character of Jimmy Torbenson. Open world, 4 Koobs. A great selection of fun activities works well for the game, the only negative being a lackluster city that doesn't really reward exploring. On foot, 5 Koobs. Control is great, and the awesome button gives you an exaggerated swagger when you hijack cars or pile drive enemies. The only critique I've got is that it could use a better ADS view. Driving, 4 Koobs. Very good car feel, but without the weighted physics of the Grand Theft Auto series, which might be a plus or a minus depending on your perspective. Tanks and the flying vehicles control well. Good, but not perfect. Could use some tweaking to really be top tier. Final score, 22 out of 25. We've got a new cow, number 1. Well, thanks for watching this review on Saints Row the Third. I hope you enjoyed Koobert Opens Worlds. Why don't you think about subscribing there to Bears and Games Neo? I've got lots of racing game review stuff. I've got Koobert Opens Worlds, and I'm going to be doing more in the Bears and Games line of queer videos on checking out bears, big guys, and just queer people in general in games. If you like this, you might like the podcast that I'm a part of. Square Roots, the classic RPG podcast, where we play through a classic RPG, Western, computer, console, Japanese, a chunk at a time, and talk about it. I'm joined by my besties, Jim, Matthew, and Vanessa, and we dunk on the games, have fun with it, love the games. I think you'll enjoy it. Go check out the links in the doobly-doo down below. And thanks, and I love you. As a friend. Now it's time for Koobert Opens Worlds to tackle a game that's infamously bad. But, questionable galaxy brain that I am, do I think it's actually bad? Yes. But also no. But also maybe? Drift 3R is complicated. Welcome to Koobert Opens Worlds, a series where I review and rank your favorite open world drivey-shooty games, because I like math and ranking things. Drift 3R is an open world driving game from Reflections Interactive published by Atari Games. It's actually a spin-off of the Driver series, although Drift 3R is the only game in the spin-off Drift 3R series. Oh, hold on, I'm getting a call from my producer. Yeah? What? It's actually Driver 3. But why didn't they call it that? The 3 is an E? No, it's a 3. It's Drift 3R. Yes, I'll hold. So hey, I'm going to talk a lot about the games that paved the path for Drift 3R, but if you want to skip ahead straight to my thoughts on the game itself, please go to 1724. Driver was pretty groundbreaking on its release in 1999. Open-world driving games were in their infancy. Before this, you had Test Drive 3 with very early open tracks, stuff like Hard Driving and Race Driving the arcades and their very terrible console spin-offs, and Vet, a polygonal 3D racing game that had a complete map of San Francisco you could drive across. Released almost concurrently with Driver was Midtown Madness, an open-world driving sandbox game on PC with various race modes. On PlayStation, previous to Driver, there weren't a ton of open-world driving games to really talk about, the most notable release being Felony 1179, a strange kind of pre-Burnout created by Climax Entertainment, the Shining Force people. But Felony 1179 was a bizarre, chaotic arcade racer. Driver was something else. Now, I may be a little biased when talk of Reflections and their games come up. I've always loved Reflections, even before I could actually play their game. The incredible screenshots of their first release Shadow of the Beast mocked me ruthlessly from the pages of Video Games and Computer Entertainment in 1989 because I did not have an Amiga. Reflections didn't come up with Driver whole cloth. It was a continuation of the physics and handling model they created with Destruction Derby 1 and 2, early PS1 games released by the lovable owl-having Psygnosis. As a longtime physics fan, Destruction Derby 2 was the first game I purchased for my new PlayStation, bought with my own money from cash I'd saved up working part-time. The Reflections Destruction Derby games featured deformable models and realistic-looking physics interactions that made sense. They weren't games about winning races. Although you were in a race, they were games about getting the most points via spinning and knocking out your opponent cars. Driver took these physics and this style of rear-wheel drive oversteering beasts and mapped them onto a mission-based driving game.
You have 2.
Though there was some openness to the missions you chose through the answering machine interface and unlockable free-ride modes for the 4 cities you play through, it wasn't an open world in the Grand Theft Auto sense. GTA 3 wouldn't be released for another 2 years, and the original Grand Theft Auto games, while open world and mission-based, existed from a top-down 2D viewpoint and focused on the chaos and mayhem an open world offered, both in exploration and in playing out missions. That's not to say Driver wasn't inspired by the chaos and mayhem of the first GTA. That's a key part too, and this chaos certainly fed into the spontaneous challenges of many Driver missions. A lot of folks say Driver is unreasonably difficult, especially in its opening garage tutorial where you have to go through a checklist of moves before getting to the game proper. This is inspired, as is much of the game, by the Walter Hill film The Driver, where Ryan O'Neal proves his chops by terrorizing interviewers in a Mercedes-Benz sedan.
How do we know you're that good?
Get in.
By the way, what's up with Walter Hill movies being so influential in game development? What with the Warriors and Streets of Fire inspiring the Double Dragons and Final Fights of the world and all. The parking garage tutorial is considered the Dark Souls of driving games by people who compare everything to Dark Souls. It expects you to know all the commands without any instruction on how to do them. You have a strict time limit and 3 impact strikes. It is doable though. You can do the burnout, speed, and brake test right away by slamming on the circle button instead of X. Both accelerate, but the circle accelerates in italics. In other words, it's the burnout and drift button. Hold circle down and then hit square before you plow into the wall at the other side. To get the reverse 180, hold down square, then start turning. Hit triangle, the handbrake, halfway through the turn to get the quick turnaround. To get the lap, just do a lap around the garage without hitting anything. For the slalom, weave between posts using circle to make the car drift easier. For the 180, drive straight, fast, and start turning. Hit triangle midway through the turn to snap it all the way. Finally, for the 360, just hold down circle in a direction and you'll do sweet donuts. Done and done. Okay. So why give you this beat-for-beat rundown in the opening of Driver 1 in a Driver 3 review video? It's actually important, and gives you a clue as to what Reflections was going for in the later games. The first Driver game tells the story of a former race driver, now undercover cop Tanner, being plucked from the NYPD to investigate a criminal organization led by a fellow named Castaldi, using his connections from his racing days to get in with low-level leaders before slowly raising his profile. Obviously, being a 1999 game, this was before social media would have made this attempt far more difficult. From the 1970s style trappings of funk, big old sedans, and blaxploitation style pimps, you might think this series was set in that era, but the first game is very vague on the year. Like how it was inspired by The Driver, Driver also grabs moments from other famous action scenes of the 1960s and 1970s, like the chase through San Francisco in Bullet. Or the Blues Brothers Cop Mayhem.
Well, this is definitely Lower Wacker Drive. If my estimations are correct, we should be very close to the Honorable Richard J. Daley Plaza. That's where they got that Picasso. Yep.
Driver 1's controls and physics, as well as a fun choice of rear-wheel drive muscle cars and the spontaneous nature of its freeform missions, made the game a huge hit. Going back to its contemporary, the PC release Midtown Madness, yeah, Driver is a massive visual downgrade, both in textures and draw distance, but its attempt at realistic physics do make it far easier than a game like Midtown Madness to pick up now. But even back in 1999, you were encountering a sensation a lot of PS1 games made you feel. The feeling that you're playing something that'll be better soon, but not quite yet. But our friend Strawman is here, asking why we don't play the PC version instead. Good question, Strawman. I risked exposing my poor PC to all sorts of viri and questionable web zones, but here you are, the PC version running smoothly on my modern computer box. I couldn't figure out how to map an Xbox gamepad, but it plays reasonably well with WASD controls. It doesn't compare with the made-for-PC graphical treatment Midtown Madness offers, but seems like a perfectly cromulent manner of playing the game, should you want to. Surprisingly bad pop-in though, and personally I think the overall look of the game suits the lower resolution and grainy graphics of the PS1. It looks perhaps a little overly clean and sharp on PC. Driver 2, meanwhile, is a game I somehow completely missed during its original release. I've been playing more PC games that year, and it had received mediocre scores. I've played the first couple of missions in preparation for this review, and it seems alright. I'll have to dig down deeper into why it flopped critically one day. It does allow for Tanner to get out of the car, but there's no combat. This was still a pre-GTA 3 world, and it shows. It retains all the hallmarks of a late PS1 release, like the impressive physics and textures and effects on the vehicles, but its ambition really does shout, what would this be like on a more powerful system? Which seems weird for a fan of PlayStation 1 games to say. Wouldn't that apply to all PS1 games? Well, to me, no. 2D games like Symphony of the Night are the crystallized ideal of a 2D platformer on PS1. But something like G-Police is a game where its ambition obviously outstrips what it's capable of performing with a draw distance of about 20 meters. This doesn't mean G-Police is bad, but it is severely visually compromised by its draw distance as a sort of Desert Strike-style helicopter adventure game. Both this game and Driver are hampered by their ambitions to create the kind of game that the PS1 just doesn't have the horsepower to output, but I personally feel like Driver is fun enough to still be worth playing in spite of the technical problems. But there definitely are 3D polygonal games that make perfect use of the hardware by scoping the sort of game they are and how they're displayed, like Vagrant Story by Squaresoft and Colony Wars by Psygnosis. By using an isometric viewpoint and creative limitations on character models during the cutscenes, Vagrant Story is, to me at least, the peak of what a fantasy adventure game can look like on the PS1. Its look gives me a nostalgic hit whenever I see it. The light halos around the characters, the incredible composition and editing of the cutscenes, the economical use of polygons in its room design. Or take something like Colony Wars, a spectacular, smooth, and gorgeous space combat series that uses the emptiness of space or simple planet surfaces to save the horsepower of the PS1 on the ship models instead. Of course, I'd have a million folks be mad if I don't mention Metal Gear Solid 1 as well, which was impressive but definitely strained against the confines of its system and felt much more at home in the next generation. Still though, those are some pretty cutscenes.
Captured by Next Generation Special Forces, being led by members of Foxhound.
I will take a brief aside and note, like my Square Roots co-host Matt, some people just can't figure out what they're supposed to be looking at with PS1 games and just see a mess of pixels.
What is that? Is it a bird? Is it a vampire? Why is its chest concave? What is on its hands? Is that supposed to be a man? Are you... Oh my god.
How can he not see this is an agender twink leather slut with claw hands? So the PS1 wasn't quite enough to realize the ambitions of what Reflections want to do with Driver. But a new era was approaching. Systems that could easily create a seamless open world to explore, a new generation of hardware. Heck, I have vivid memories of riding in the back of a grocery cart at Loblaws and seeing a Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec demo running on the monitors there. Staring, awestruck at the detailed car models running at a slick and perfect 60 frames per second. The next generation was here, and it seemed like it could do anything. Honestly, it's pretty crazy I remember that. I was only 22 years old. And it wasn't just Gran Turismo 3 and the PS2. You already had some incredible displays of computing power with games like Code Veronica and Crazy Taxi on Dreamcast. And the GameCube and Xbox were quickly coming too. Reflections announced in late 2001 they would be releasing a driving game for the new PlayStation, but it wasn't Drift 3R. It was to be Stuntman. Stuntman took the ideas of recreating scenes from movies like in Driver 1 and 2, but this time it's going to be a whole swath of genres and a whole bunch of vehicles. It starts with Toothless and Whopping, a sort of Guy Ritchie Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels English crime caper. This shows you just how the game is going to unfold. You have to follow a precise set of actions shouted at you by the director to the letter. Take too long between segments? Fail. Miss 3 small objectives in a run? Fail. Take a wrong turn? Fail. Didn't take that jump correctly? Fail. Damage your car too much? Fail.
You're driving too fast? Jail. Slow? Jail.
Here's how the opening mission in Stuntman goes. Remember, it has all the same controls as Driver, so X is accelerate, and circle is still accelerate, but in italics. Hit circle to accelerate. Do a 180 with triangle to swing your car around, hopefully better than me. Hit some boxes and a time gate. Weave through traffic in the tunnel. Through the gap here and hit some tires. Hit more boxes. Around the trash bin. More boxes. Finally come to a gentle stop in the brake zone. Good job. Yes, it was very much exactly like the garage scene from Driver 1 all over again. Although the actions you can do are mostly spelled out more clearly with icons, and time limits are explicitly stated on the screen alongside a timeline showing which stunts you passed and which you failed. Also, these runs are 2 minutes long at most. On the downside, it can take you dozens of attempts to get a single one right enough to progress, and getting them perfect may require more skill than my ancient brain can muster. So why is this game so hard? Why are all the Driver games so hard? In fact, based on games I've looked at on this channel so far, like Project Gotham Racing, Metropolis Street Racer, and The Getaway, why are English games so hard? The answer is the ZX Spectrum. It's something these developers either grew up with or started their careers with. The ZX Spectrum famously is a mysterious box into which all English children must place their hands and endure the most horrific pain ever experienced.
You see this? Put your right hand in the box.
What's in the box?
Pain.
They take the mantra that reasonable difficulty is the mind killer to heart, and their games will show you the same lack of mercy. When I booted up Stuntman to record some footage, I had my original save from 2002 on my memory card, and it was fun to see what mission had me stuck, the final run of the Indiana Jones-alike Scarab of the Lost Souls, where you pilot a little German armored car thing. And you know what? I completed it. Take that, 20-something me. Step aside, 40-something me is here to finish what you started. It's not hard to see why I was stuck here. Here's the points you have to hit while driving a little armored car. Don't call it a tank or military nerds will get mad. Go through the columns, around the monument, avoid the tiny stone platform lip that can snag you, hit some boxes and then quickly aim the turret at the monument, jump the monument, time gate, smash some shacks, around the truck, near the explosion, through this shed, through trucks and then jump the bridge, take the wing off the plane, near these explosions, through 2 walls, destroy some small businesses, take the corner off the building but not too much or you'll crash, weave through traffic, through a wall, jump onto the sub, and your father's brother is named Robert. There's also a 90s conspiracy thriller type movie, you know, like Enemy of the State or Extreme Measures, where, as my mom would say, there's lots of explosions and running about. There's a Bangkok action movie, a James Bond pastiche called Live Twice for Tomorrow, and... they're doing the Dukes of Hazzard thing, right? And they're English, and they don't really know the cultural weight of the Confederate flag, and it was 2002, and mime's tugging collar. Did folks like Stuntman? Reviews were all over the place, with some folks loving the challenge and addictive nature of trying to get each stage right, while others were put off by the extreme difficulty combined with the load times between each run. I think this style of game really came into its own with indie platformers like Super Meat Boy, where the difficulty was a feature and not a negative. Red Lynx's Trial Series 2 showed how the do this a million times until you get it right design really can work, especially with instant restarts and online leaderboards inspiring you to beat your friend's time. It's the kind of game design that clicks well with my particular kind of brainworms. I'm obstinate and will do the same thing 40 times to beat it, if I believe I can do it. I'm not particularly good at games, but I am good at slamming my head against a challenge in a game until I eke out a win by the tiniest margin. Anyway, Stuntman has a lot going for it. Some stages, like Toothless and Wapping's London in particular, are downright gorgeous, and back in 2002 I was blown away with the lifelike lighting on cars and levels. There's also a surprisingly effective look over the hood view, with shaky cam and everything that works great. Plus you've got great physics for the vehicles and objects you can collide with, tight controls, and detailed vehicle models and environments. Like compare the London flybys to the Getaway, and it's at least as impressive. This got me so psyched for what Drift 3R was going to be like, especially with the included trailer. While most game sites claim Drift 3R was announced in July 2002, a few weeks before that, Reflection snuck into what Stuntman called the DVD Extras, the first trailer for Drift 3R, but then they more logically called it Driver 3. After a montage of cutscenes set to mood music and a camera pan through the environments they created so far, they announced an end of 2003 release date. This didn't happen, and the game was delayed 3 times until its eventual release in June 2004. There was a second trailer made for E3 2004, and let me tell you, I was excited.
This is my destiny, only child. Come on and rescue me.
This is definitely more of a functional build of the game, showing off the locales, the narco soundtrack, the impressive car models, and lots of the physics engine. My particular favorite moment, which I remember very well, was Tanner shooting up the car, and the individual bullet decals, the shattering windows, the body damage and tire damage were perfectly animated. And this really is in the final product. Now you might say, firstly, that a 2-year gap between announcement and release isn't too bad, and a 7-month delay isn't really anything. Back in 2004, this was scandalous, I tell ya. The internet was full of scandal, and that definitely wasn't the only scandal to hit this game's release, but more on that later. It was a big game, with a massive marketing campaign, ads in every magazine, and TV commercials. Given the popularity of the Grand Theft Auto series, obviously Infogrames and Atari felt compelled to meet the same kind of success, whether or not the games were really the same sort of concept. And while my expectations for the game were reasonably high, I already knew from Stuntman the limitations on the engine, especially in rendering people. What I got, though, I definitely had mixed feelings on. Since the release of the original driver, I had eagerly purchased Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City, and completely devoured them both, using my obstinacy to get through even the toughest missions. And while the more cartoony world and decidedly non-sim handling the vehicles in those games weren't quite my speed, I loved them. They were just plain fun, with immense cities to explore, great radio stations, particularly in Vice City, a wide assortment of cars, and just tons of stuff to do. Drift 3R starts out completely on the wrong foot. You begin in Tanner's fabulous Miami home, and we are immediately greeted by maybe the worst on-foot controls of any open-world game I've ever played.
Sir, you're cleared for the range. You said to let you know.
Whether in first-person or third-person mode, the camera feels incorrectly inverted, the view is loose, and you're constantly stuck on objects. Just trying to get out of his house is a chore. I do recognize this house, though. This is 100% that house from Heat.
You know, you can ball my wife if she wants you to. You can lounge around here on her sofa, in her ex-husband's dead tech, post-modernistic bullshit house if you want to. But you do not get to watch my fucking television set.
Right, I'm forgetting something. Before that, you're treated to a deliberately paced opening cutscene. This is also very different from what Grand Theft Auto 3 did, and very different from the majority of big-budget games of the era. It was pre-rendered. This was par for the course when the first 2 driver games were released, but even back in 1998, a different way of doing things was being teased and brought to you by 3 massively influential games: Half-Life, Metal Gear Solid, and The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. All 3 featured story beats that were rendered in-game in their own way. For Half-Life, it never left the first-person viewpoint of Gordon Freeman. For Metal Gear Solid, its cinematic and anime-inspired cutscenes were dynamically rendered in-game, straining against the limits of the hardware.
What's a Russian gunship doing here?
I have no idea.
And Ocarina of Time had simple but effective cinematics using the in-game models to cleanly explain the story with surprising style and emotion. And let's not forget what my Special Boy Vagrant story did with its cinematic visuals, somehow almost exceeding what the PS1 could do with smart texture and framing decisions. Even Square was limiting the number of them in 6th generation games after leaning on them so hard in PlayStation. Sure, Final Fantasy X and 12 had them, but only during a few key moments, with most scenes rendering out in-engine. Even when modern games use pre-rendered cutscenes, and they do, Final Fantasy XIII, for example, used models very close to their in-game ones to disguise pre-rendered cutscenes, and original hardware they flowed seamlessly between the two. However, when running the game on modern machines, you'll immediately notice the drop in resolution and frame rate. Okay, the tangent police are coming, but I will have to say, even in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you can see when the game swaps between in-game and pre-rendered cutscenes, not just from the frame rate drop, but also Cloud's weapon suddenly reverting back to the Buster Sword. They're breaking down the door. I didn't even get to how the only modern acceptable uses for pre-rendered cutscenes that don't look like the in-game graphics now are those super expensive Blizzard or Blur Studio intros and trailers. Anyway, back to Drift 3R. So pre-rendered cutscenes were falling out of favor in 2004, but plenty of games still used them. The ones in Drift 3R butted up against my own 2 bugbears. Firstly, I just generally preferred games showing the story in-engine because it kept you in the game, and second, I'm just not a huge fan of crime stories. However, this is one of those things that has softened somewhat in time, and revisiting these 20 years later, and actually giving them a chance to tell a story, they're alright. I mean, it's still not my preferred way to tell a story, but they're very Michael Mann inspired, with long shots of the city, a moody soundtrack. If it's a choice between delaying the game for another 2 years so they can get motion capture animation, lip syncing, and complex facial and body rigs, I can completely understand why they didn't. Pre-rendered it is. The game tells the story of Detective Tanner, an undercover cop and former race driver now working for the feds, and his partner Tobias Jones. Their assignment is to infiltrate the Miami crime ring South Beach, where they quickly discover the dire and insidious plot to steal 40 valuable cars. With that, you got an all-star cast, featuring Michael Madsen as John Tanner.
But this is different. This is a war.
No. It's an extermination. It's no more of a war than there's a war between men and maggots, or dragons and wolves, or men riding dragons, throwing wolves at maggots.
Want some breakfast?
Ving Rhames as his partner, and Michelle Rodriguez as the no-nonsense South Beach leader, Kalita.
What the hell were you thinking?
Weirder still, some of the smaller parts have big names too, including a bit part for Iggy Pop as Bacchus.
Punk rock is a word used by dilettantes.
The target of the first few in-game missions, and Mickey Rourke as the big bad villain, Jericho.
What? Your new vibe is a double-edged sword, much like the kind Mickey Rourke tried to kill me with.
Cramming tons of celebrities into your voice cast is always a sign the game may be over-budget and bloated, but at least they do a reasonably good job. Tanner is laconic, so Madsen doesn't have a ton to work with, but he's fine. You don't end up getting attached to him like, say, Al Pacino in Heat, because he doesn't quite have those Al Pacino moments.
I told you when we hooked up, baby, that you were going to have to share me with all the bad people and all the ugly events on this planet.
Same with his foil Jericho, who is even more monosyllabic, even with Mickey Rourke voicing him.
Oh, everybody born before Jesus is in hell. They went straight to hell.
I'm gonna have to reinvent you. Break you down completely and build you up from scratch. Just like Mickey Rourke did to me sexually.
Kalita, South Beach lead. She moves $80 million a year in stolen guns and cars.
Michelle Rodriguez is an interesting woman to cast as the first apparent big bad. She's soft-spoken and businesslike, but refuses to play it like a purring cat woman.
What the hell?
Sorry to disappoint you boys. It's just little old me.
Instead, her Kalita just wants to get the work done, and of course doesn't have time for incompetence and betrayal. Admittedly, I'm a fan of Rodriguez, so it's always nice seeing her get work. There's also a positive shift away from the man influence, who tends to have women in the "and the woman he loves" roles in his crime stories, rather than them having agency in the caper. He and Rodriguez get the majority of voice lines in the game, along with French investigators Vauban and Dubois. Weirdly, the game leans heavily on Rhames for voiceovers, even over scenes with evident dialogue written for them, which maybe could be a late-in-game editorial decision. Rhames' delivery is lively, and he's having fun with the role, which helps a lot. So the game opens with a quick in media res flash forward to its climactic finale in Istanbul, and you get the sense of the Man-style cinematic pacing right away. Suddenly Tanner is in a hospital, and so is Jericho. Uh-oh, Tanner's flatlining. It's quite the choice to set up the game with apparent death of the main character, but surely this will be resolved in the finale, right? Right? Oh, and hey, Nokia sponsorship. Remember Nokia? Good times. Also, you'll notice everyone in the game is constantly drinking sobe. When you get control of Tanner, he's walking through his home, and you're coming to grips with both the on-foot controls and the third-person camera having issues with confined spaces. I do recommend switching over to first-person view on foot. So you're told via answering machine to head over to Miami Police HQ to get some gun training in. Now, I'm not an undercover cop who's working for the FBI, but showing up at the police HQ would seem like a possible danger to your cover. Then you head to a scene in a Miami PD cruiser, again, probably a bad idea given your covert role in the investigation, to intercept Bacchus.
Then it all began. Should have been routine. A lead came through on South Beach Bacchus, a major player on the repo circuit. We went in.
You get your first quick firefight, where the first-person aiming, at least on consoles, can really save you some frustration. There's no cover mechanic, but there is a not particularly useful role. Fortunately, it's short, and Iggy Pop decides to get a lust for life, dumps his apparent hostage that Ving Rhames mentions but has never seen, and jumps into a getaway car, a sweet off-brand Trans Am. Now for your first pursuit. You'll notice three things right away. 1, he seems pretty difficult to catch up with. 2, 2, there's zero leniency for you if you snag up against obstacles in your pursuit of the guy, especially as most roadside objects like lampposts and traffic lights are immobile and will just hang up your vehicle immediately. At this point, open world driving games were trying to figure out exactly how to best to operate, and both the Driver series and the Getaway stuck with, when you hit a lamppost your car will grind to a halt, which is much more realistic, but unfortunately not very fun. Contrast this with, say, Midtown Madness, Grand Theft Auto 3. The game is much easier to play and much more fun if you can smash through almost any obstacle rather than get hung up on geometry. Now, games like Forza Horizon count on you plowing through almost anything in your way, and give you some kind of XP for doing so, even if plowing through centuries-old Roman walls is both a bad idea for your vehicle and for, history. The third thing you'll notice is there's no health bar for Iggy Pop, which is something new to the series. That's because this chase is entirely scripted. In fact, almost all chases through the game are scripted. For most pursuits in previous Driver games, this was a sandbox-style affair. The villain had a route and a point where they would get away, or a time limit within which you had to catch them. It was up to you and your driving skill to knock them off the road and destroy their car. But in this game, for almost all chases, that's not what's going to happen. You'll pursue them, they're scripted to be too fast to catch up with, and they'll hit a geographic trigger point along their route where it stops and switches to an on-foot action or cutscene. The most frustrating part of this is that their vehicles during these scripted pursuits are invincible, both to you, yes, you can catch up to them if you drive better than Reflections thought you could, and to oncoming traffic. Contrast this with an Infamous, or at least I assume it's Infamous. I don't know. I haven't seen anyone else talk about it, but it's one of 3 really difficult missions. Grand Theft Auto Vice City mission, where you have to murder a property owner at a driving range on a golf course. The first few steps are unskippable. You have to get a golf outfit, head to the course, drop off your weapons, and get to the driving range. He'll sick his guards on you and run off to a golf cart. From there, you have a ton of options and plenty of time to do it. You can engage with his guards, run off on foot, or get onto a cart of your own. I've completed this mission in a variety of ways as I've been testing out different versions of Vice City. This time here I got lucky and ran his golf cart off the course to the water, where he immediately drowned and mission over. But if you let him get to the exit, he'll get into his limo, which you can carjack yourself if you want, or you can place cars blocking his exit before you even get to the golf course. There's truly a cornucopia of options. The controlled chaos of the PS2 era of the Grand Theft Auto series gave the groundwork for your own ways to play, something that the later games don't quite nail, and only the Watch Dogs series has been able to match. It's fantastic. But no, you're unable to knock Iggy Pop off the road and instead have to follow him around for a few minutes before he's eventually hit by another car in a scripted event. On the plus side, the car controls are excellent, and once you get the hang of not hitting unbreakable roadside objects and keeping up with the target, it's pretty fun. But it's basically a run from Stuntman, just without the prompts and UI telling you to know the time limits involved and the points you have to hit. This will become more obvious as the game progresses. Tanner shoots Iggy Pop, non-fatally, and then tells Mr. Pop that he's going to get him off the streets and return the missing V8 to Kalita. Iggy Pop agrees and then reaches into his coat. Tanner shoots him immediately, and it does appear to be revealed that Iggy was just reaching for his keys. Fortunately for Tanner, there are 0 consequences to this action.
Jones, it's not like we're tracking the human genome here. It's simple stuff. I get the car from Tico's and take it back to South Beach. You know they're gonna bite.
They got no driver now, that's true. Because you shot him. How many times you gotta shoot someone?
Tanner and Jones argue over his murder of Iggy Pop for a moment, but Tanner's going to continue his, plan. So cut to night in Miami, and you're on your way to the hotel to pick up the car. Looks sorta pretty. You got the lights along Miami Beach, cool Michael Mann vibe. Let's take this moment to talk about how the game looks. Stuntman has detailed environments, cutting-edge shadows and lighting for the time, and impressive physics. Drift 3R continues 1 out of the 3. The shadows still look very good, but the environments are inconsistently detailed, and the lighting sometimes looks great, but sometimes, like in this night scene, just don't look right. The Mediterranean locales, Nice and Istanbul, feel like they have more detail strewn around, but Miami feels just plain barren for the most part. Compare this with the Toothless and Wapping area, which was of course much more limited in scope than a several-mile-wide city, but really does feel denser and better lit. Overcast lighting in games generally does a great job of showing off graphics. Remember that viral first-person video of the motorcycle racing game Ride?
Is it truly for real, as the tagline says?
On the other hand, I'd say Nice and Istanbul look better than, say, the rural areas of Houghton and Halloran or the Bangkok Highway from Blood Oath, so there's definitely a shift forward for the engine in parts. Compared with the GTA games, GTA 3 on PS2 had a smaller map, but a denser, more packed city with early motion blur and some weather and filter effects. Rockstar doubled down on these with Vice City, where everything is bathed in blooming sunlight, storms look impressive, but then again the actual building models and environments tend to look extremely simple, remind me of something like Shadow of the Empire. Except for that Miami Beach hotel lobby. That's one good looking lobby. San Andreas, released a few months after Driv 3R, feels technically more accomplished and with much better environments and effects, but the cars themselves are still simple models, though the physics on older cars gets an upgrade to allow for the simulation of hydraulics. GTA always had the win when it comes to character models and animation, though. I knew from Stuntman that the engine just didn't have the oomph to render faces, but for as giant-fisted and cartoony as the GTA trilogy models were, they did have motion capture, competent walk cycles, and a certain sense of style. That's really where GTA wins in the look department for me. Sure, it relies maybe too heavily on PS2 era filters, and the models were chunky, but there's a cohesive style throughout. The cars, the people, and the environments fit nicely together. It sticks out a little in the Definitive Edition remasters, where the lighting is improved but has a completely different color pass without the dominating filters, and everything could look a little sparse, much in the same way Driv 3R does on PC. The PS2 GTA games feel more inviting to goof around in, but then again, Driv 3R isn't really about goofing around. The other open world game series from the UK, though, graphically and story-wise does what Driv 3R does too, and in many ways trumps it. The Getaway's environments, character models, and vehicles were unmatched until GTA 4 came along 5 years later. Or maybe True Crime New York? The engine was built from the ground up to be able to do cinematic cutscenes and on-foot gameplay as well as driving, and while dated now, they're still impressive for the hardware. With everything except for physics, visually the Getaway has Driv 3R beat, but I'll get back to physics in a bit. Visually, Driv 3R has some bright spots, but overall is pretty average for the 6th generation. Let's not even get into how good some of its racing game competition at the time, like Burnout 3 or Gran Turismo 4, looked. Gran Turismo's almost unfair. They were on one console, have master artists and programmers and massive amounts of money behind them, plus the environments were limited to a tunnel around the player car, not an open world where you could step out and explore, but still, Gran Turismo 4 is a great-looking game. Driv 3R really fumbles its on-foot sections, not just for how unplayably bad they control, but for how drab they look. The camera getting hung up repeatedly on walls doesn't help, though. You make your way through the hotel's back entrance, up and down some staircases. Again, the first-person view is best for these scenes, as the camera generally won't get hung up on walls. It might not initially make sense why you're taking the stairs up to the roof, but it's to get to the elevator down to the garage, which is somehow only accessible from rooftop. There you're assaulted by 2 waves of jerks, and you can finally steal the sweet, sweet Corvette, which you deliver to a dubious Kalita. She accepts you in the South Beach crew, and then there's some driving, some shooting, some betrayals, and a few other tasks to really get on her good side. You even crash a Ferrari through a window. Michael Madsen does a slideshow for Rames and emphasizes that Kalita must be working for someone else as this job is too big for her. Cut to slow motion Michael Mann walking, and Solomon Kane from Driver 2 and his bodyguard Jericho / Mickey Rourke.
The gangster most other gangsters would like to whack never goes anywhere without this man, Jericho.
Well, you know what they say, boys. If you can't stand the heat, get off of Mickey Rourke's sex grill.
The next notable mission is where you, along with Lomaz, chase the Gator, who has betrayed Kalita for the last time. This initially took me, let's say, around 3 hours of retries to get through. There's a few friction points, as we see where we head out to the Gator. Lomaz, also in your car, tells you he's going to shoot out the tires. I tried for a few to get Tanner to swing a gun out of the car, but sadly, this is not a feature in the game. I don't know why I thought it was. Instead, you're controlling Lomaz as he shoots, sorta? He says, "Get me close to the escort, I'll take it out," but you have to control his shooting. And the vehicle with the arrow on it isn't the escort you're supposed to be targeting, that's the Gator. They're on a scripted path with some randomized elements. Basically, they can take a few different turns, and you can take out the escort car early, but all chases end with the Gator almost getting into an accident leaving this alley. However, interestingly, you can do some damage to the Gator, which will be taken into account through the finale of this mission. The real tough part comes when you're on foot. You're walking through a few different rooms of the marina, many of which have health hidden around, but you and especially Lomaz can be easily killed if you don't take out the enemies fast, though. Check out those physics! This is pre-Half-Life 2 and not even a Havoc game. There's a reason the trailer spent so much time on the destruction of the cars, as the damage model, physics, and excellent driving dynamics all show off how the game handles these calculations admirably.
Physics Corner!
So how do the physics compare with the other games of the era? Say Drive 3R is the best of the bunch, if we're talking about Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and the Getaway. Cars are weighty and slide around turns, but it's relatively forgiving, and generally won't have you losing complete control of your car every time you brake. There's good physics from smashing into roadside stuff, and a fun selection of breakable objects, though some work better than others. The shelving in the marina works perfectly and is a great demo of the game, as is shooting at a car. But the boxes in the marina warehouse just slide around and flip with no resistance, yet also seem to damage your character if they hit you. On the other hand, there's the moment later on in a completely different boathouse where you have to use a forklift to create a platform to jump over, and this doesn't work so well. Grand Theft Auto 3 has more go-karty style cars that centrally pivot rather than simulating wheels and suspension to any refined degree. Same with Vice City, where Lamborghinis and Testarossas are as easy to drive as a New Yorker. It wouldn't be until Grand Theft Auto 4 that they go all in on simulating floaty suspensions, rear versus front wheel drive versus all-wheel drive cars, and the reaction from the fanbase was negative. Having floaty boats that steer and corner badly may be realistic, but a big portion of the folks that like these games want their car handling to be fun, not punishing. You might be like me and think that big floaty boats with broken suspensions like Nico's cab are fun to drive, but we are sickos. The Getaway, meanwhile, does try to do a more realistic representation of the licensed cars, but doesn't have the same kind of vehicle deformation that Grand Theft Auto or Drive 3R does, and its handling often feels more squirrely instead of predictable, to the point of frustration.
Back to the game!
The worst point comes at the pier in the marina, where you have two guys shooting at you, who you have to pretty much ignore to get to the waiting speedboat as the Gator speeds off to Speedville. You have about 8 seconds to get from the door to the other speedboat, and if you exceed that, instant game over. Many guides suggest ignoring the two henchmen on the pier, but I find killing them both quickly with a shotgun results in less health loss than letting them unload bullets into you as you slowly climb into the speedboat. Lots of game overs here. Then you have to chase the Gator to the cluster of shacks on stilts, Stiltsville. However, if you just follow the Gator to the shack and try to get out, you'll be caught in the sights of 3 unseen gunmen who kill you as you struggle with the controls, accidentally ending up in the water, trying to climb a ladder, or respawning back in the boat. The secret is to park out of range of the first 2 gunmen, shoot them blindly, then slowly creep up to the side of the building and take out the third on the balcony before trying to get into the stilt shack. At this point, you may get killed by the guy waiting with a shotgun around the corner, as the camera gets stuck in the tightest hallway possible. Again, first-person mode is the way to go, as is practice. As always, the checkpoint here is back at the beginning of the marina, so you'd have to work your way through the guards again, and that 8-second race back to the speedboat. In the shack, you have to systematically work your way through each room, which does fortunately have a lot of healing items, and basically memorize where jerks come out with guns. At the end is the most cheesable boss fight ever, where you can easily peek over a balcony through a doorway and unload bullets to the poor Gator. The end. Nice. It's time to go to Nice! You get another slow-mo cutscene introducing Henri Vauban and Didier Dubois, 2 of France's toughest cops. As you see them arguing, it's all told again through Rames's voiceover. They want to seize the incoming vehicles, while Tanner wants to know exactly who's calling the shots. Rames explains this through the following simile.
There's a story. A monkey puts its hand in a jar of nuts, gets it stuck on the way out. Monkey pulls harder and jams his whole hand in there. Tiger shows up, and Monkey still got his hand in that jar. The story goes, smart monkey lets the nut go and lives.
Or is that an analogy? Could be a metaphor. Polemic? Parable. It was a parable. You pick up Kalita, crime. She sees Dubois planting the largest tracking device humanly possible on one of the cars through a CCTV. This use of the laptop made me realize, T-Mobiles and Nokias and Sobeys somehow passing my notice before, that hey, this game is set in the now times. Wait, then why are all the cars 70s old-timey? Is this some kind of alternate reality where phones and computers kept progressing but cars stayed the same? But it's alright. At least this means you get a cool Peugeot to drive around Nice this time. Nice. I like setting the game around southern France. It's unusual for gaming, and home to some fun homages to stuff like Ronin with De Niro zooming around in Euro cars. You know, the one where Drax from Moonraker was still kinda hot after all these years?
Well, who are you?
A fellow like you, trying to make it to retirement.
Well, at the end of the day, we're likely to be punished for our kindnesses.
You don't have to worry about me. I won't hurt you.
And maybe also the Luc Besson written and produced Taxi. The good one, with the Peugeot, the French one. Anyway, Smash and Run is probably the most fun mission in Drift 3R, even if it's a little frustrating. But on the Drift 3R scale, a little frustrating and having to retry it 5 or 6 times is literally nothing. A trifle. A soupçon. And it's neat because, although there's a seemingly impossible time limit for the task, steal back 3 cars from the area and get them onto a moving truck, once you figure out the timing for everything, it's actually pretty doable. Tough parts are 1. Knowing where you have to go and the efficient route to get there, 2. Getting the vehicle into the truck, and 3. Finding another ride around where the truck drops you. And while the truck path is completely scripted and won't change, traffic around you is random in every mission, so there's going to be an element of luck, including whether there's anything fast and grabbable around you. The best choice is always going to be a motorcycle for this one, as it will get you between each vehicle location quickly and can maneuver around the garages. I just wish the truck would slow down a little. Just a little. Let Papa in. Let Papa's car in and not have it flip around. Please, truck, Papa needs in that trussy. But once you get used to the parameters, this is probably the mission with the largest amount of slack in terms of time limits. More crime. Uh-oh, they think Tanner is a cop. To test him, they give Tanner a gun to shoot the hanging Dubois.
If you're a cop, you won't shoot him.
But the gun isn't loaded. Phew. Again, I don't think Tanner is a very good cop. You get speeded by the bad lady Fabienne and suddenly can't go below 50 miles per hour, which is a fun time.
It will explode when you drop below 50.
There's one turn right at the end which requires a rough jump off the beach to really work, but it just takes some practice. The end where you have to ditch the car and have it blow up is pretty satisfying once you get the timing right, too. Fabienne gets the drop on Kalita, and then Lomas gives you the option to either run straight to Kalita or stop the truck full of bad guys on the way to her first. The latter is, of course, the more satisfying option. Then you get the second half of the mission, and the second extreme frustration section of the game. You save Kalita, but then have to pursue Fabienne in what appears to be an Alfa Romeo Montreal. She'll select one of 3 or so paths at random, but all have the same endpoint. You're not supposed to be able to catch up and damage Fabienne on the way, but if you end up doing this mission a couple of dozen times, you'll find yourself catching up to her and finding out, hey, you can't actually damage her car. And she can't be damaged by other vehicles who can't even impede her progress. At this point, my brain was sliding into such a stupor that I felt like I was seeing the game code, like Cypher in The Matrix.
Is that
The Matrix? Yeah.
Do you always look at it encoded?
Well, you have to. The image translators work for the construct program. But there's way too much information to decode the matrix. You get used to it. I don't even see the code. All I see is blonde, brunette, redhead.
Ah yes, this is one of 3 traffic combinations the game will generate as you exit the alley. She makes one of the path choices here. If you're at this point and she's X distance away, the game will tell you you lost her. I see the sexy bear in the red singlet through the 1s and 0s. Speaking of, there's almost 0 room for error. Let me perform a dramatic recreation for you at my frustration at this chase. Oh dear, I have snagged on this lamppost again. Bother, that piece of level geometry got me stuck. Once again, she is still visible, yet the game declares that I can no longer see her. This is frustrating. I see that this impassable arrangement of cars has made the run impossible. I may express statements wishing harm upon the creators of this level, but I assure you it is hyperbole and not an actual threat. I am merely frustrated. It seems as if she'll pull over at predefined points in the chase, though if it's due to catching up to her, please let me know in the comments. Either way, now you get to gun her down. This has to impress Kalita for sure. One aspect that the entire Driver series does that you just don't see much anymore are replays. Every mission has a replay afterwards, which not only automatically cuts your driving together with cinematic angles, but also allows for director mode where you can set up and place cameras and cuts. I spent a weird amount of time with this, especially back in Driver 1. It's a neat feature that even survived all the way up through Driver San Francisco in 2011. Anyway, Fabienne is super dead, because you're a very good police officer who definitely does things ethically. But then, crime, French cop gets mad at you for impeding his takedown.
This is over. They kill him tomorrow.
I came to find out who wants the cars. That's what I'm here to do, to finish this.
We get Dubois out, and you quit this case. Affaire classée.
And you go to rescue Dubois, which is definitely a mistake, as it was a super obvious trap.
I remember you. You're the cop, and I'm the guy who said I'd find you.
Uh-oh, Mickey Rourke has found you.
No, Liz, don't test it, especially this early in a relationship. It's like when Mickey Rourke tested his catapult on me.
And he shoots Dubois. And then there's the make a platform via a shaky crate on a forklift, which honestly may not be my favorite point in the game. Now we finally get to Istanbul. Honestly, you're not here for very long. Even with the traffic-style sepia bathing of everything, Istanbul is a nicely detailed city with good-looking buildings and density. You snoop on more crimey stuff.
The cars will be delivered when and where we agreed. All you need to do is fix the money drop. Fix it up with Kalita.
This is not the problem.
Problem? You want to elaborate on that for me?
Miami. Coconut Walk. My employers say the Gator is still alive, wanting to talk for the right price.
Tanner overhears that the Gator is still alive, so he decides to import him to Istanbul. Meanwhile, Tanner walks out of there and crosses the line with Vauban.
You walk out of here and you've crossed the line.
And then kills like 200 Turkish cops? I feel like there may be a line crossed here. Rames lets you know that Jericho is working with the Bagman, who is another villain, who will take the cars to Russia. The big drop site? A stadium. Here the game zags a bit, as Kalita senses something's up. The game does a weird bit of Rashomon. Suddenly you play as Rames going over to the Bagman with a weird courtyard shootout. Then you reach the hardest point in the game, a two-part Kalita chase, first in the car and then on bikes. Again, I felt like I was seeing the game code and how traffic was spawning, how Kalita could crash through anything without slowing down, and whether it was a fraction of a second too slow through a particular moment, and the game would throw up a "you lost her" at me. Catching up to her does nothing, as I tried and succeeded several times in hitting her car, which did nothing but spit out mine. Frustrating since they gave her a life bar that means literally nothing as you cannot damage her vehicle. The second half, the bike chase, turns out can go on indefinitely, and this time you do need to catch up to her, which makes me wonder if Fabienne was the same situation. I'm not sure. I went on a wild 10-minute chase through the city without catching up to her, and it never ended. However, after a couple more tries and getting close to her as she went through the very frustrating tiny entranceway that I screwed up getting through several times, and finally caught up to her, and that was that. Kalita, now in a cell, tells Tanner and Ving Rhames that the cars are long gone, but they still have a chance to grab the bagman. More betrayals, a bomb truck, a chase the train mission that I completely borked up, but the game just somehow let me drive in 5 minutes late. Did I complete this mission in any way like the designers wanted me to? No. But it was a W, and I'll take it. Then a final Heat-style showdown, where you end up at the beginning of the game. And so, in beautiful poetry, the game ends as it begins.
Mistake.
And now he and Mickey Rourke are lying comatose in hospital beds, flatlining, holding hands. Probably. And that's the end of our story.
Nabız atmıyor. Hemen elektroşok cihazını verin. Hadi. Herkes açılsın. Çekilin.
Nice try, Hazel. But you made the same mistake Mickey Rourke made on that catamaran. You didn't kill me when you had the chance.
Now, without going too deep into the next chronological chapter in the game, which essentially begins with Tanner in the hospital, I thought after finishing Driv 3R again for this video, oh neat! Driver San Francisco picks up exactly where the last one left off. No, my friends. No, it does not.
Clear!
The conceit for Driver San Francisco is that you're in a coma, and you're trying to figure out what Jericho has planned via your own subconscious adventure of body jumping between people in their own cars. But that is a completely different coma than the one Tanner is in at the end of Driv 3R. The man just loves a coma.
I'm just gonna floor it, okay? Go right ahead.
Did people like the game? Did I like the game? The reaction was weird. Online folks hated it. Overall critical reaction was poor and got worse as the years went on. There was also an early Gate scandal about advanced copies being given to 2 print magazines, PSM2 and Xbox World, that gave it a 9 out of 10. There's a Larry Bundy Jr. video on this, linked in the show notes, that goes into more detail with a conspiratorial take on the whole deal. Check that to learn more. The Larry Bundy video showcases a ton of bugs in the second half. I definitely found it unplayable on Xbox at first, but after cleaning the lens and disc it was only a little buggy? Mostly Miami on Xbox, which had clipping out textures driving around at night at times, but that's all I've encountered. Not great for a finished product for sure. It could be that the PC version in particular was unstable. I tried messing around with that, but could never map the X input controller properly to the game and just gave up. The PS2 version was relatively solid for me. There was that one train mission that completely bugged up in a manner that let me complete it in an hour instead of having a time limit. Though both versions could have their physics completely crap out during intense collisions and spin a car high in the air. Another notable element that I always took as 2 UK companies teasing each other, but other folks have imagined to be an intense hatred, was the weird little digs driver games and Grand Theft Auto games took at each other. Grand Theft Auto 3 featured a mission called Two-Faced Tanner, with an undercover cop named Tanner who used the female walk cycle. But honestly, if the game hadn't told me he was animated unusually, I wouldn't have noticed.
Maria and I have gone shopping.
Our source in the police has informed us that one of our drivers is a strangely animated undercover cop. He's more or less useless out of his car, so we've tagged it with a tracer.
In the mansion infiltration mission Mad Dog's Rhymes in San Andreas, CJ can walk around a guard who is getting frustrated while trying to play Driv-3R.
This sucks! I mean, how can Refractors mess up so bad? Tanner, you suck ass!
Driv-3R, meanwhile, has a secret side mission in its Take a Ride free exploration mode where you can hunt down Timmy Vermicelli. Got him! A play on Tommy Vercetti from Grand Theft Auto Vice City. See, he's got massive hands because Rockstar models have massive hands, and he's wearing floaties because he can't swim. Sick burn, boom, roasted. Aside from the Take a Ride mode, there's actually, if you're again my kind of weird, hours of fun to be had with friends trying to see who can last the longest in survival mode. It puts you in a vehicle in the city of your choice with a maximum wanted level and a whole army of furious cops. Survival mode also gives you a chance to see the physics glitch out as a dozen cop cars careen into your vehicle at 100 miles an hour, but trying to see how long you can last and handing off the controller between friends can almost be as good a party game as Crash mode in Burnout. Just don't go off-road. That's not fair. The cops can't figure out how to drive on grass. Which version should you play? For this review, I played through the entire game on PlayStation 2 and about half of it on Xbox, and would honestly recommend the Xbox version between the two. Whether or not you're up for the PC version depends on how comfortable you are with the amount of tweaking that the game needs to work properly on controller, and that's something I gave up on. While it runs the smoothest by far, the ultra-sharp and clean presentation on the PC version may or may not work for you. I think there's something to be said for the dithering filter over the PS2 version that gives the illusion of detail in an interesting way, but I find the controller mapping for the Xbox version far more playable, as it puts gas and brake on the right and left triggers and has a separate handbrake. The PS2 version goes for the driver 1 style accelerate and accelerate in italics, which can give you a slight speed boost in chases, but makes the back end completely loose. In this case, I think the simplified Xbox controls work better, and the game runs in progressive scan, though being interlaced, the PS2 version feels a little more smooth and direct. The major downside of the Xbox version are the aforementioned texture glitches that can show up on roads and walls. The Xbox version was definitely unfinished. As for me, I have a bit of a soft spot for the game. It's not good, but it has good parts to it, and I'm the kind of sicko who does get pleasure out of playing missions over and over to somehow eke out a win. Watching the cutscenes again for review and giving them more time and patience, yeah, they're alright. It's trying to go for a slower paced, mature action scenario than some of the more bombastic titles out there, but that's not what I go back for when I'm in the mood to play the game. It's the weighty physics and fun driving dynamics. Less than 2 years later, in 2006, Reflections would release Driver Parallel Lines, which uses the same engine with updated on-foot sections that more closely follow the Grand Theft Auto style, and a neat past/present version of New York City that grounds the game in both time periods better with more era-appropriate cars. That's an easier game to get into now, not only due to it still being available from GOG and working with modern controllers on PC, but also having a more sandboxy style and approach to missions. While the plot can be heavy at times, it does feel looser and more fun than Driv-3R, while maybe losing a bit of the focus. All that's left for me now is to apply mathematics to my analysis of the game, much in the style of Jeff Gerstmann and his science. Graphics, 3 cubes. I definitely appreciate the detail of the car models and the work of the environments in Nice and Istanbul, but Miami mostly looks pretty sparse and unappealing. Story, 3 cubes. Well acted and not overwritten, with pulpy but genre-appropriate dialogue. Driv-3R surprisingly elicits a non-sleepy performance from Madsen, and a genuinely fun one from Rames' voiceovers, but it becomes farcical as Tanner racks up a larger and larger body count of police officers and criminals alike. Also, for the most part, it feels that most plot points are played out in FMVs, and are removed from the sections you actually play. But hey, Kalita and Fabienne are both female characters with motivations and objectives. Open world, 2 cubes. There are jumps to find and Timmys to murder, but that's about it. I'd score it lower, but the survival mode, as broken as it can get, is just a wild good time. On foot, 0 cubes. Genuinely the worst an on-foot section has felt in any of these open world games. The camera clipping through the walls, the terrible aiming, random instant deaths, awful. Driving, 4 cubes. I really do enjoy the driving feel of this game. I'm hesitant to even give it 4 due to the frustration of solid roadside obstacles giving an immediate end to many runs, but if there's one thing I like the game for, it's this. Final score, 12 out of 25. We've got a new cow last place, which probably wasn't going to surprise anyone, but the math adds up. Thanks for watching this video all the way through to the end. Please tell your friends, and give this a big ol' click on the like button. Subscribe if you want more Koobert Opens Worlds, Bears and Games, racing game reviews, queer video game history, and more. If you think you'd want to hear me talk about RPGs and other such story-heavy games, tell your podcast app to download the Square Roots podcast. You can hear me, Vanessa, Matt, and Jim play through your favorite games a chunk at a time, like a book club. We finished over 60 games now. Goodbye, and I love you. Platonically.
Hello.
It's time for car stealing to enter a new dimension, specifically the third one. Welcome to the 5th game ranking for Koobert Opens Worlds. In this series, I take a deep dive into an open world drivey-shooty game, like a Red Faction, or a Sleepy Dogs, or maybe even a Mafia. Then I grade it on graphics, story, open world, on-foot feel, and driving feel, and using my patented mathematical process, crunch the results, then ranking it against every other open world game I've reviewed. Check out the chapter markers if you want to skip ahead, but beware, there will be tangents. This time on Koobert Opens Worlds, we're going to rank the big granddaddy of the genre. Yep, it's finally time for me to drink from the Rockstar Trough, and see if the original team did it the best. I'm going to look at the prehistory of Grand Theft Auto 3, what the game's all about, why it was so good, what wasn't great about it, how it looks, how it holds up, the definitive edition, and where Liberty City goes in the future. For this review, I finished the story missions on Xbox, and I played through the end of Act 1, basically reaching Staunton Island, on PS2, PC, and the definitive edition on Series X. I'm also working my way through the Switch version of the definitive edition, but that will be in a separate review. As you can see here, I do have a completed save of GTA 3 on PS2, but you'll note that as of July 2024, the save is, 22 years old. It can legally drink in the United States. Footage will be primarily taken from the Xbox version of the game, but whenever I switch it up, I'll put a little note in the lower third. Grand Theft Auto 3 wasn't supposed to mark a turning point in the games industry. The first 2 GTA games were top-down mission-based shooters with a hefty dose of "you can't do that" gaming to it too. These were games where finally, as so many people had joked about in the 1980s and 1990s, you get points for running over Hare Krishnas and old ladies. While it's not Postal, and I do feel the original games were a bit more sophisticated and better made than that, there certainly was a large amount of "can you believe what you can do in this game?" for the first 2 GTAs. One clear indication of the superior quality of Grand Theft Auto 1 to Postal is that Uwe Boll has yet to make a GTA movie.
Should have sent a couple cruise missiles down there. I just wish I knew how to quit you.
Postal. Heck, even my own experience with the GTA series prior to 3 consisted of spending a few hours with the demo on a shared college computer at the student newspaper, enjoying its goofy, gleeful violence and never once engaging with the missions it was designed for. This isn't an unusual experience for the GTA games, really. Many folks played long enough to maybe unlock Manhattan and then goof around trying to cause as much chaos as possible, or using cheat codes to summon all weapons and tanks. GTA 1 really does have so much of what made Grand Theft Auto 3 great, but from a top-down perspective. It follows the British style of loving to use teeny tiny characters in their biggest games, like Sensible Soccer or Lemmings. You wouldn't be that far off thinking of this as a top-down Lemmings crime game, really, down to the sped-up voices it uses for the mission briefings. Once you get used to the tank controls, especially the jumping, it does actually play well. This original GTA has a bit of an arcade aesthetic and feel, including, as I said before, getting bonuses for running down a whole line of Hare Krishnas. Tangent time. You might be asking, what are Hare Krishnas? They were all over 80s media. Hare Krishnas was a Bengalese Hindu movement that achieved worldwide membership as part of the countercultural, anti-war, and consumerist movements of the 1960s. Members could be seen in cities, airports, and other popular areas in trademark robes and top knots, chanting Hare Krishna throughout the 70s and 80s, before facing a massive downturn in the 1990s due to pretty horrifying revelations about its treatments of members. Anyway, here's Airplane.
Hello, we'd like you to have this flower from the Church of Religious Consciousness. Would you like to make a donation?
No thanks, we gave it the office.
Going back now, what's funny is just how tame it feels for a shocking game that generated Manhunt 2 levels of controversy for its time. Has a sense of style, including selectable radio stations, something that had only been seen in a few games including Rad Racer, Outrun, and Test Drive 3 before. The missions are exactly what you expect out of a later Grand Theft Auto game. Steal this car, kill this dude, blow up this train, all from this adorable perspective. You might be surprised to learn that this game offers a choice of cities as you make your way through it, starting with Liberty City, then San Andreas, then finally Vice City. Sounds familiar. It does feel much more designed for one-off playthroughs, as you can't save at all mid-campaign for each city. However, the missions are quick and easily replayable. You're really score chasing and trying to unlock the next town. If you do want to try this now, the PS1 version is easy to find, but zooms in and out so frantically that it genuinely gives me motion sickness. The original game on PC is not available through Rockstar's launcher or any retro service like GOG, but if you do manage to find it, getting it to run on PC is actually not that bad. Just check out the PC Gaming Wiki for links to GTA RTP. So who made this game? Originally tagged as a release by DMA Designs, but quickly rebranded as Rockstar North, part of Take-Two's Rockstar label. But DMA Designs had over a decade of work before that. Founded by David Jones, Mike Daly, and Steve Hammond, no Housers yet, in Dundee, DMA Designs were surprisingly entwined in the 1980s and 1990s bedroom coder scene of English development, once again meaning they'd been forced to withstand the ZX Spectrum.
You see this? Put your right hand in the box.
What's in the box?
Pain.
The name DMA has a few legends regarding its origin. On Mike Daly's 2000s blog, Java Lemmings, he says it could both mean direct memory access, or, as he loved to tell journalists, doesn't mean anything. Now, they'd had a massive hit on their hands before, that being Lemmings, the adorable little strategy puzzle game where you have to guide lemmings with notoriously poor survival instincts to the exit of a level using a variety of skills and tactics. Even this was handled with some dark, destructive glee. Not only as you could watch your lemmings die in all manner of ways, but also listen to their plaintive wails as you ordered them to explode. Tween Koobert loved this, but please note, Tween Koobert was a monster. They even ported Shadow of the Beast, notably created by driver team Reflections Interactive, to the TurboGrafx during these early days. According to Now Gaming's history of DMA Designs, the company ended up working closely with Nintendo of all people, releasing the Nintendo-branded impressive Uni Racers, or Uni Rally in Europe, for the Super Nintendo in 1994.
On the Threshers Roundtable, our panel of daredevils discusses Uni Races only for Super NES.
It's like single wheel boarding. Down the track, double roll, fly!
How did you find the two-player action?
Man, I was hauling, gaining on the brawl, hit the ice, smack, Flip City. Ace the dude's time. Blue action, triple flip, bacon in the pan.
Well, it appears then to be totally slamming. Next week, doing triple flips without tossing your crumpets. Good night.
And for the N64 developing Body Harvest. Nintendo balked enough at the content of Body Harvest, particularly its violence, to decline to release it under their brand. Just a quick look at the footage here shows Grand Theft Auto clearly has some Body Harvest ancestry, as both are open-world drivey-shooty games, but in this one, the bad guys are aliens. GTA 1, according to Now Gaming, quote, proved to be a huge success thanks to the adult nature of the gameplay. Assassinations, beating up Hare Krishnas, and carjacking were all par for the course, and howls of protest were heard from newspapers like the Daily Mail who were incensed with GTA's content, despite the fact that it carried an 18 certificate. Courting this kind of scandal would become a never-ending pastime for the series. GTA 1, released in 1997, was a big enough hit to get DMA Designs purchased by the legendary British design house Gremlin Interactive that year, who then in 1999 were purchased by Infogrames, the same group that had picked up Driver 1 creator Reflections Interactive. Midway Games also released the shuttered Body Harvest for Nintendo 64, which in many ways has been held up as a predecessor to the kind of open-world 3D action GTA 3 would be known for. During their brief time with Gremlin, they also released Space Station Silicon Valley, a game that I rented but completely did not understand, even though I was an adult by this point. This is where it gets complicated. BMG Interactive was the publisher of Grand Theft Auto, not Gremlin. According to IGN's feature on the history of Grand Theft Auto by Russ McLaughlin and Lucas M. Thomas, Dan and Sam Hauser, prep school lads who began with BMG Music signing hip-hop and rap artists, immediately moved over to their new gaming division in 1993. David Jones pitched them on his ideas for a top-down crime game, which he initially called Race and Chase, but the Hausers deftly renamed to Grand Theft Auto.
Drop the, just Facebook. It's cleaner.
Jones left after the Gremlin acquisition, before the Infogrames pickup, and the Hausers studio was bought by Take-Two. They smartly decided to buy DMA Designs from Infogrames, separating Driver and Grand Theft Auto forever, as part of the Take-Two sublabel Rockstar. 2 years later, DMA Designs, now fully under the Rockstar label, released Grand Theft Auto 2. Grand Theft Auto 2 wasn't the huge success of the original, though especially on PlayStation it feels a whole lot more playable. The on-foot sections control better, the frame rate is more stable, and it stops zooming in and out so much. This time, it takes place in the near future in a generic city called Anytown, USA, and the futuristic designs feel a bit less charming than the recognizable cars and locations of the first game. Again, if you have some patience for tank controls and really want to see the origins of the Grand Theft Auto series, this and the first one are genuinely fun games. Of note is the 8-minute live-action film that the Hausers made for the game, clips and stills from which were used for the opening movie and interstitial loading screens of GTA 2. It's not great, though it does have the fun Easter egg of the protagonist this time saving a monk instead of running them over. It gives real film school vibes, except with a budget. However, you'll note angles from it were used in the GTA 3 cinematic, so at least it was a useful learning experience. Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2 do feel like blueprints for 3. Other than having a fully explorable 3D world, so much of it was already there. The licensed music via the Hausers, the parody radio station commercials, playing separate factions off against each other. They had the template for a great game here, they just need to splash in some Driver-style action to make it work. Speaking of Driver, those first two games gave a great template for how car-based 3D missions could work in an open environment. Tailing people, escaping the cops, running folks off the road, it's all there. Other influences, particularly 1988's spectacular Chase HQ by Taito, played into the vision of car combat Reflections Interactive created with Driver. Though more weapons-oriented, you can't forget about car combat games Twisted Metal and Interstate 76 either. Driver had a sense of style that the GTA games adopted too, steeped in 1970s car chase movies and big honkin' muscle cars bounding through open cities. Unlike GTA 3, however, missions were discrete and felt separate from any free roaming you can do, and given the hardware and overall design, the world felt empty and less interactive than even the top-down Grand Theft Auto games. What the Driver games excelled in was the great feel of the heavy American sedans and coupes, and the top-notch physics Reflections had used for their previous Destruction Derby games. Driver 1 was a huge hit on PlayStation and PC, and you know this was something DMA Designs had in their sights as a target to hit and exceed with their next game. Grand Theft Auto 3 is the template for open-world drivey-shooty crime games. Elements of the genre have shown up before, from exploring cities at street level, like in Streets of SimCity, the fast car chases and escapes of the Driver series, the stunts and races from Midtown Madness 1 and 2, and the chaotic violence of something like Postal. This is really the progenitor for open-world mayhem games going forward, from the way missions are structured to the letters on the map indicating mission points. It feels more focused than Grand Theft Auto 2, putting you right away into the action in media res. Grand Theft Auto 3 was released on October 22, 2001, weeks after September 11th.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
It's as much a part of the immediate post-9/11 culture as anything else to be impacted by the events, and and later associated with it, like how suddenly so many songs on the radio were about Superman and heroes. Grand Theft Auto 3 is a savage satire of Clinton and early Bush-era American culture, which was notable counter-programming to the sudden embracing of militarization that immediately swept the country after the attack. Heck, I was there. I just moved to the US 3 weeks before the attack on a student visa to go to film school, one that was right by an Air Force base, and suddenly there were no commercial flights at all, only fighter jets flying in formation. It was intense seeing a country and the world change so rapidly, and Grand Theft Auto 3 even had to change some of its content at the last minute. Originally the game was going to be an October 2 release. The Cessna-style prop plane was made wingless, removing all flight from the game, and the police cars were redesigned to look less like real NYPD cruisers. You start as an unnamed protagonist, whom many interpret to be Claude Speed from Grand Theft Auto 2, although this game takes place in 2001 and that game in the future. He does, however, bear a distinct resemblance to the actor for those live-action scenes they filmed for GTA 2. Also, I guess he's introduced as Claude in San Andreas. Honestly, until I read that fact, I'd totally forgotten about his cameo in that game. But for this game at least, he's a blank slate, unnamed, with no interpretable desires or ethics. Most GTA fans still insist that GTA 3 Claude is not GTA 2 Claude, but your headcanon on this may vary. This GTA guy begins by running out of a bank only to be stopped by a woman, Catalina, who seems to imply that he was just a dumb patsy for her and she shoots him and leaves him for dead. Unfortunately for her, he lived and vowed for revenge. Or not. It's pretty hard to say. He doesn't talk. He never seems particularly motivated to do anything except whatever other folks ask him to do. Expository newspaper flashes on screen and cut to cars staking out a police van. They want someone on it. As the van crosses a bridge, an explosive is tossed out and the transport van is hit, heat style. But they aren't here for you. They're here for, and it's really hard to see with the low-fidelity character models, but I believe it's an elderly man who will flit in and out of the story later. You knock out a guard and grab the keys to your cuffs, and end up standing alone in this chaotic crime scene with another guy. This is 8-Ball. His hands are pretty badly hurt,
Lay low, but my hands are all messed up, so you better drive, brother.
And he asks you to drive him to a safe house he knows.
This is the place right here. Let's get off the street and find a change of clothes.
From there, 8-Ball asks you to drive to Sex Club 7. Maybe the best fake club name in a game, named after everyone's favorite English boy and girl group, S Club 7.
Ball's got some business upstairs. Well, maybe you could do me a favor. One of my girls needs a ride, so grab a car and pick up Misty from the clinic, then bring her back here. Remember, no one messes with my girls. So keep your hands on the wheel. If you don't mess this up, maybe there'll be more work for you. Now get out of here.
Luigi is our first celebrity voice actor in the game, Joey Pantoliano from Baby's Day Out.
He acts for you, Ed.
He ain't thinking straight. Don't look back.
What are you doing?
Now, for a game that, while promising, wasn't expected to be a massive hit, they still managed to get the budget for a pretty beefy cast. Joey Pant sends you on an exciting quest to pick up one of his girls, Misty, which is a bit more thrilling than it sounds, as it's your first real exposure to the game mechanics. Right here you do notice something that noted video game fan Bjork would later comment on. I disagree here, though. The compass on the minimap really does help, as does the little pip indicating the general direction of where you want to go. Also, originally the game came packaged with a big fold-out map, as with the later PS2 games, though from Vice City onwards, the pause screen would also have a full map with notable locations. GPS-style guidance, though, would have to wait until Grand Theft Auto 4, 7 years down the line. Luigi's quests are just showing you the basics of getting around the map, picking people up and dropping them off. In between, you're free to go on your next mission or explore the city, which is packed with stuff to do, at least for 2001. Notable missions from Luigi include the Fuzzball, where he has to provide escorts for the officers, and means you have to race around the map picking up women and bringing them to a police station under a strict time limit. And Pump Action Pimp, your first real car-on-car combat mission. All the Grand Theft Auto 3 tutorials, such as when you die for the first time or get arrested, are done through unvoiced text boxes in the top left corner. They include the trademark GTA text box beep. This continues even to this day, with the last Rockstar game, Red Dead Redemption 2, even still featuring this style of tutorial. Though in that one you can at least walk around while they lecture you.
How you doing, kid? The Don's son, Joey Leone. He wants some action from his regular girl, Misty. Go pick her up at Hepburn Heights, but watch yourself. That's Diablo turf. Then run her over to his garage in Trenton and make it quick. Joey ain't the kind you keep waiting. Remember, this is your foot in the door, so keep your eyes on the road and off Misty.
He also guides you to the next mainline mission giver, Joey, the son of mob don Salvatore Leone, who is far more interested in fixing up a dune buggy than crime.
Pirelli is stuffing his fat face in the St. Mark's Bistro, so steal his car and take it to 8 Ball's bomb shop up in Harwood. You know 8 Ball, right?
The voice of whom you may recognize from the aquatic classic Deep Blue Sea. It's Michael Rappaport.
Doc, I locked the pen like I do every other night. The fish got out some other way. Huh. What are you looking at me like that for? Who are you gonna trust? Me. That's who. You trust me. You know why? Because I'm trustworthy. But hurry up, you won't be eating forever.
His most interesting job is bringing some bank robbers to a bank, which they rob, and then you drive them back. Again, more fun than it sounds, because unless you've been causing mayhem on your own, this may be the most police trouble you've found yourself in. The police system is pretty fun in itself. Crimes done in front of police officers, like say running someone over or stealing a car, will net you 1 star and the officer will attempt to arrest you, following you as long as they can in their car or on foot. Committing further crimes or fighting back against the police gives you another star, and the stars keep mounting up to a maximum possible 6 stars. 2 stars sends multiple police cars after you and they'll start to try to ram you off the road, or if you're on foot, to shoot. 3 stars and the cops will start blocking roads and sending a helicopter with a sniper on board after you. 4 stars and the SWAT vans show up. 5 stars, the FBI are called in their hotted up faux Dodge Intrepids. Finally, 6 stars means the military is out with tanks and you will have to work very, very hard to get away. One of the better Joey missions is Mike Lips' Last Lunch, a very simple 3-step mission of boosting a car, taking it to 8 Ball's weapons dealer and equipping it with a bomb, then parking it back where you got it and getting out of Dodge before Mike starts it. Simple, but satisfying. There's also Dead Skunk in the Trunk, where you have to drive a car with a dead body in the back to get crushed to dispose of the evidence, but you get jumped by some Pirelli goons. This just has some neat attention to detail. The trunk is splattered with blood, and if you get any damage from behind, which you probably are going to get with the Mafia mooks chasing you, you'll see a corpse tied up in there.
Yeah, no, Tony, I've tuned her real sweet. She purrs, you know what I mean? Oh, here's the guy I was telling you about. Alright, listen, this guy, he ain't Italian and he's no mechanic, but he could get things fixed. This is Pop's capo, Tony Cipriani.
Yeah, I'm Tony Cipriani.
From Joey, you meet Tony Cipriani, who you might remember as the voice of Drift 3R's John Tanner, Michael Madsen.
Word goes out South Beach lost one of their V8s, and every known hitman in Miami's asking for you. 3 hours later, you're walking right down the middle of Collins Avenue, tight with Tico's gang. You cut a deal, Bacchus, but you're not gonna give them back their V8. I am.
They'll smell cop and come looking for me.
But I'm getting you a haircut and a new life up north.
The car's in the Gold Coast Hotel. I gotta take it to a warehouse called Nastro's. They're waiting for me.
Tony with an I is going full Tony with a Y soprano here, with a mother with whom he communicates solely through yelling.
Sorry, Ma. Yes, Ma.
Tony's also the biggest bear of the game.
And mangle any triad gimp that gets in your way.
Tony's missions are more violent and more strongly introduce a running thread of the game. Liberty City is being taken over by a new narcotic.
What is it? Well, street name's Glint, but it's also known as Glow, Glimmer, or Satan's hair lip.
There's a new high on the street. Goes by the name of Spank. Some wise guys been introducing this trash to my girls down Portland Harbor. Go and introduce a bat to his face.
Spank. On my initial playthrough in the bygone year of 2002, I don't think I noticed them laying the story threads through this early, but there's several mentions of Spank being distributed through the city by the Colombian cartel. Joey makes vague reference to it.
Chunky Lee Chung is pushing Spank for some new gang from Colombia or Colorado or something, I'm not really sure. Who needs details anyway?
And these dealers are causing Tony some grief. But an even bigger thorn in his side are the Chinese Triad, who are pushing him out of his turf. His missions are based around an escalating turf war with the Triad, starting with a Triad business deal that turns into an ambush. This highlights one of the problems with this game, and gives you a situation that every version of the game I played has some difficulty with. You're in a confined space, and get rushed by Triad goons on all sides. The PS2 and original Xbox versions have a variety of views, and there's a delightful retro to 1 year ago when GTA 2 came out, top-down view that emulates the first two games quite well. This view actually makes shooting scenes quite a bit easier. Don't expect to aim down sights, and most guns don't have any form of free aim. You've just got auto-targeting, which can get quite finicky the closer an enemy gets to you. Fortunately, if you happen to pick up that shotgun you can find in North Portland in one of the apartment building courtyards, you can take out multiple baddies before they can even reach you. At least the amount of mission scenarios that force you to take an encounter on foot like this are pretty limited. The situation with the Triad escalates quickly, with Tony assaulting a small laundromat, and then moving you to stealing and exploding 3 Triad trucks. He suggests you visit 8-Ball to grab some grenades. I'm going to say it right now, trying to hit those trucks with a grenade in this game, with these aiming mechanics, is just not going to happen. One of the neat things about playing a game again after 20-odd years is getting flashbacks to your first time playing it, and I distinctly remember this being the first real tough point of the game and getting frustrated with 1, how few grenades you're given, and 2, how bad the aiming is. Add in trying to get the perfect timing for when a truck rolls by and this becomes a rough mission. But it doesn't have to be. Given the open nature of the mission, with 3 trucks rolling around the Portland area and no time limit, you've got a whole lot of options. For one thing, you don't need to stick to the grenades. A more useful weapon here just might be, say, a fire truck. In my Drift 3 Hour review, I was dismissive of the physics of these early 3D Grand Theft Auto games, but coming back to them now, that's not entirely fair. Vehicle weight does matter, and having a larger vehicle than the one you're trying to ram off the road is a good idea. Get enough speed and the fire truck sends them flying, which is great. Or, if you don't feel like getting your Chase HQ on, you can simply hijack the truck and then do whatever the heck you want with them. Crush them! Use them to smash into the other truck, hopefully making one or both catch fire and explode. Park them and use grenades to explode them. The choice is wide open. Actually, don't bother with grenades. You're much better off destroying these with other means. Throwing grenades tends to attract a lot of police attention, particularly if you miss, while just ramming the truck into the other ones barely gets a blip of attention even if a cop is right there. Unless you kill someone. Another tough Tony mission, this time given to you by letter and the voice of Tony's mother, is where you have to take 2 Mafia heavies with you and take out 3 Triad bosses. The closest, which I would consider the first, but you can do any combination and again have no time limit, is easy. Just run them over. The second is on the other side of some bollards in Chinatown. The entire island of Portland is in full gang war chaos, with hordes of Triad and Mafia just blasting the heck out of each other. It's wild. Here, the shotgun that Tony gives you helps out immensely. Just target the guy as best you can and fire. At this point, the henchmen you're assigned are probably dead, and you've got to get out of there to get to the third boss, who you find when you get to the fish factory can't be reached without a Triad fish van. The annoying part is that in this area, plenty of fish vans spawn, but they also tend to be the Yo Ma fish vans, and not the belly-up fish truck that you need. After this, with the Blowfish mission, Tony decides the factory has to go.
Liberty once and for all. 8-Ball's rigged a dust cart with a bomb. It's on a timer, so if you mess up, there'll be no evidence. Go and pick up the dust cart.
Where he asks you to collect a dust cart to drive to the facility. Now, I'm pretty sure that's a Legacy UK term, and not secretly what all Italian-American New Yorkers call a garbage truck, because I don't think I've ever heard anyone call a garbage truck a dust cart at any point in my life in Canada or the US. And my parents are from England. By this point now, Chinatown has become a dangerous place to wander around, even out of missions, as all Triad members will attack you on sight. Gotta get those collectibles and mayhem missions out of the way first. Finally, Tony asks you to drive a limo and pick up all the bigwigs for a meeting back at the Don's lavish estate. You grab Joey in the limo from the garage, Tony from his mom's restaurant, and Luigi from Sex Club 7.
How you doing?
Shock and surprise, the Triad launch an all-out assault on these mafia bosses, and you have to haul them to safety. Fortunately, the limo is pretty sturdy, but you can be out of luck if, as you see here, the Triads manage to completely block any entrance to the estate. Now, Don Salvatore Cipriani, as played by beloved Goodfella and soprano Frank Vincent.
All right, good.
You're getting too big on me
Just
now.
don't go busting my balls, Billy, okay?
Hey, Tommy, if I was going to break your balls, I'd tell you to go home and get your shine box.
Decides to take you under his wing and make you a made man in a short mission chain that leads to the end of Act 1.
I see nothing but good things for you, my boy.
There's Chaperone,
Move your butt.
where you meet the initially insulting Maria,
Every time. And here she is, the one and only Queen of Sheba.
Salvatore's unhappy younger wife. In an unusual move, Maria is played by a prototype defense platform called the Defensive Ectothermic Ballistic Intervention Mazar Cannon. The DEBI Mazar holographic AI interface was an offbeat choice, but it does a good job.
Yeah. I'm sure your new lapdog has everything covered. And isn't he big and strong? Hey, Fido, let's go visit Chico and get some party treats. He's at the rail station at the Chinatown waterfront, I think.
Maria calls you Fido, but then compliments you on treating her with respect after a rave she goes to ends up being raided by the feds.
You know, I enjoyed myself for the first time in a long while, and you treated me really good with respect and everything. Well, I better go. I'll see you around, I hope.
Finally, you get a climactic multi-part mission to the source of the spank that's infesting the city, when the Don asks you to tail a suspected rat, and then said rat leads you to the Colombian's tanker. The Don wants this tanker exploded, so you need to see 8-Ball and somehow finance the $100,000 in bomb parts yourself. Fortunately, even if you fail this mission, the game only charges you once, as that will likely be a big chunk of your mission earnings. 8-Ball can't shoot to defend himself, but he'll go plant the charges. He just needs you up on the roof of a nearby building to take out the defending Colombians, in a pretty fun but challenging sniper sequence. You have to quickly take out all the attackers as 8-Ball runs up, which means you need to be zooming in and out and quickly swiping through a whole mess of guards while exploding some barrels for good measure. The tanker goes boom, and Cipriani wants to reward you, after you dispose of a cheetah, aka Testarossa, with a body in the trunk? Hood?
I just got one little job for you before we can all celebrate. There's a car around the block from Luigi's club. The inside is covered in brains. We had to help some guy make up his mind, and it proved a little messy. Take it to the crusher before the cops find it.
I don't think you can fit a body anywhere inside a Testarossa other than the seats. Either way, you get a urgent pager text from Maria telling you to get the hell out of there as it's a trap. If you continue with the mission objective, you indeed will explode. You meet Maria by the docks with a boat and her Yakuza buddy Asuka.
Listen, Salvatore thinks that we're going behind his back, so he was offering you to the cartel in order to make a deal. I couldn't let him do that. I mean, the worst thing is, it's all my fault because I told him we were an item. Don't ask me why. I don't know. Look, you're a marked man on the Mafia turf, and I've got to get out of here, too. I've seen too much killing, too much blood. Look, this is a friend of mine, okay? She's an old friend. It's so good. She's someone we could trust.
Come on, enough of the speeches. We better get out of here before we get more hysterical Italians wanting less friendly reunions.
It turns out the betrayal is her fault. She told the Don she was having an affair with you. But hey, now you have access to the Manhattan Island proxy, Staunton Island. I did have to look up what exactly part of the greater New York City area Portland was supposed to be. Apparently it's Queens and Brooklyn. Also, apparently the Bronx and Brooklyn are two different places. Who knew? My New York City geographic knowledge is exceptionally poor. Don't even ask me what Shoreside Vale is supposed to be. Jersey? No idea. I didn't realize, and you might not either, that each universe of Grand Theft Auto has different versions of Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas. There's the original 2D universe, the 3D PS2 Trilogy universe, and the current HD era universe. For instance, Manhattan Island is Staunton Island in GTA 3, while it is Algonquin in GTA 4, and Liberty Island in the 2D games. So now you can check out the Times Square-ish area around Torrington/Bedford Point with big ol' ads. There's the Staunton University and stadiums up north, and a whole lot of the city is under construction. You also get a new safe house with a double-wide garage for more car storage.
We have certain issues to clear up before we continue any form of relationship, business or otherwise. Let's lay our cards on the table. I am Yakuza, and I know you worked for Salvatore Leone's family.
You start off with Asuka as your main quest giver, and she does seem to be having a sort of Fear Effect style hot lesbian affair with Maria, although I could be reading that wrong.
Meanwhile, Maria and I will catch up on old times.
Oh, Asuka, you've got a massager.
That's not a massager.
She wants you to prove your loyalty by offing the Don. Quite the power move. GTA 3 guy has no compunctions about this, though to be fair, the Don did just try to have him killed. This is a neat mission where you know the Don will be exiting Luigi's strip club, Sex Club 7, surrounded by guards, and it has a Mercenaries-like level of openness to its design. Of course, it's probably fair to say that Mercenaries has GTA 3 level openness in its missions, but that's a whole other discussion. You can run Don Leone over, though his guards are all equipped with shotguns, which can make any non-armored vehicle unlikely to survive the maneuver. You can chase his limo through the city, preferably with something large like a fire truck, though the route between Luigi's and this mansion is pretty short, so you have to be really on the ball to make this work. Or, hear me out, you can use your beloved sniper rifle. At this point, you should probably have some bullets left after the sniper mission, but you can also buy sniper ammo, gun included, at the Staunton Island Ammunition. Taking out the Don in one shot is immensely satisfying, though I imagine running him over with a fire truck or dust cart could be pretty great too. Other than Sayonara Salvatore, other missions of note from her here are Under Surveillance, where you have to take out the agents monitoring Yakuza activity around Staunton, and at which point I probably started using the sniper rifle as GTA's hammer, to which all assassination targets become nails. Listen, when you find a tool that works, you stick with it. There's briefly a wall full of agents on balconies that I imagine would be pretty tricky to handle with anything without free aiming, and in the original Xbox and PS2 versions of the game, that's either the sniper rifle or the assault rifle. On the original trilogy release on PC, all weapons are free aim with mouse and keyboard, the game not bothering with lock-on in this mode. There's a boat-on-boat combat section that's pretty fun with Paparazzi Purge, and Two-Face Tanner gives you the opportunity to murder the protagonist of most of the Driver series, as part of a probably good-spirited feud between the two developers. Asuka introduces you to her brother Kenji for a few unremarkable missions, as well as maybe my favorite mission to give her in the game, Officer Ray Machowski.
Another bent cop. Well, it's a bent world. Just because I lost a few partners, those suckers from Internal Affairs have started sniffing around.
A corrupt cop on the Yakuza payroll, voiced by Robert Loggia.
Try some new Minute Maid orange tangerine. It's got calcium. Then I'm not drinking it.
Oh no, it's sweet. You like it.
I don't believe you.
Well, then who would you believe?
I don't know, Robert Loggia. Whoa, Robert Loggia.
Billy, your mother's right. New Minute Maid orange tangerine tastes great. It's got as much calcium as milk.
If you say so, Mr. Loggia.
Yeah.
This is great.
Enjoy your breakfast.
Kenji operates out of the Staunton Island Casino, and he had one mission I found hair-pullingly frustrating back in 2002, if you're wondering why I'm bald. You need to steal a Yardie Lobo. Every other gang has easily identifiable cars they'll frequently ram you with, but every mission I'd done to this point through payphones for the Yardies had them in a station wagon. That's not what he wants. There's specifically a Yardie Lobo, which looks just like a purple Idaho, but has 3 circle taillights instead. This vehicle only really shows up around the casino, so if you head on the road north from there, you'll most likely walk into one, but it can take a while. Afterwards, they'll show up all the time, of course. But Ray, he's great. He always meets you in the Belleville Park bathrooms, and that's, for some reason, the only area in the game with fixed Resident Evil / Silent Hill style angles. Not sure why, but it's neat. His missions include Silence the Sneak, where you have to throw Molotov cocktails in a window to get an informant Leon McCaffrey out of a building. Easier said than done. arms shortage, where you meet the friendly arms dealer and have to help him defend his base. Finally, you must deal with Ray's anger when it turns out Leon McCaffrey is still alive. You need to knock his cast-covered body out of the ambulance, and then use some kind of explosive to get through his bulletproof casing. This one took a while, due to the sheer amount of police resistance that happens when you attack the ambulance, and also one time where poor Leon did get embedded in an overpass and was hard to hit. That arms shortage mission is the third most difficult on-foot section, as you basically have to sneak around crates and avoid being in the line of fire of cartel jerks. It requires patience and a lot of body armor. Or you'll notice those rocket launchers above the crates. Finally, you get to meet Donald Love, a sort of Trump surrogate real estate magnate obsessed with deal-making.
Nothing drives down real estate prices like a good old-fashioned gang war, apart from an outbreak of plague, but that might be going too far in this case.
He's voiced by Kyle MacLachlan of Dune and Fallout fame.
What's in the box?
Fame.
This take on a pre-apprentice Trump feels a bit quieter and more erudite. The actual Trump wouldn't drop 25-cent words around much, like erudite.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
Down the hall and to the left.
Thanks.
This was the same era as Sex and the City's Big.
You see that guy? He's the next Donald Trump, except he's younger and much better looking.
Hi.
You know him?
No, I've never seen him in my life.
Another Trump surrogate who ends up in an on-again, off-again relationship with the worst sex columnist ever. His initial set of quests start with you rescuing the elderly Southeast Asian gentleman from the Colombians, who I believe was the target of their attack on the police transport van back at the beginning of the game. Love's ultimate goal is to establish a gang war to weaken all the gangs of Liberty City, so his next mission for you is to steal a Colombian pickup truck, one of the best vehicles in the game by the way, and run over Asuka's brother Kenji. At this point, Kenji has been threatening GTA 3 protagonist Guy, so again, it's somewhat understandable. There's another boat mission, A Drop of the Ocean, where you have to quickly pick up 6 packages dropped by a dodo. And the time crunch on this one is real. If you spend too long getting a boat and getting it over to the right area, the police will come and grab the packages themselves. Love then informs you this was a diversion in the mission Grand Theft Aero, and the package has been waiting inside the plane the whole time, which has been impounded by the Liberty City Port Authority. You swing by there, only to find all the cops dead, and the Colombians are there, and pretty peeved at you. You have to grab the package from the dodo, which can't fly for reasons mentioned earlier, and then the game gives you a weird moment to look at the vans the cartel arrived in, which you can possibly miss and drive around not sure as to what to do. Then lets you know these were seen around the construction yard on Staunton Island. The last rough on-foot fight is here, though pro tip, you can climb up the next door tower and snipe most of the bad guys before you walk through their killing maze. Also remember that the top-down view and the shotgun are your friends in close quarters like that for best viewing angle. As you make your way up the tower, you get the drop on Miguel and Catalina.
Hey, let's get this out of here. God knows what it is, but he seems to want it badly enough, so it must be worth something.
Who the heck?
You!
Hey, take it easy, amigo. No es nada, no es nada.
I left you pouring your heart out into that god.
Miguel, resigned, hands you Love's mystery package, while Catalina jumps off the girders into a dumpster. Oh, and she shoots Miguel.
Choice, baby.
We always got a choice, you dumb bastard.
I'm sorry about the crazy bitch, man. They're all the same, please. Por favor.
So, the whore got away.
Asuka has returned from a possibly sexy vacation with Maria. Again, I don't know, maybe I'm misreading the scenes between them. But she decides to torture Miguel out of vengeance for her dead brother, never finding out that it was you rascally little scamp, that ran over him with a Colombian pickup truck. At this point, the chaos of the city is building up. After Love's move to frame the Colombians, Asuka is trying to torture more info out of Miguel. Meanwhile, Donald Love has a few more missions for you, grabbing a Secura car, which he uses to transport his elderly Asian friend, defending said Secura car after the feds find out his location, and then driving it around as a decoy for a set amount of time as a diversion on the now unlocked third area, Shoreside Vale. Shoreside Vale is huge, and very vertical, with tunnels and hills and even some wilderness area. There's not much to do here, there's no ammunition, just a secret black market weapons area behind the police station, but there's still plenty to explore and a fun world design. Stage design? City design? I don't even know what to call it.
You weren't followed. Good. This is it. I'm way over my head and I'm starting to drown here. The CIA seems to have a vested interest in Spank, and they don't like us screwing with the cartel. I'm a marked man, so I'm getting out of here.
You also take Ray to the airport. He's been investigating the importation of Spank into the city, and realizes at this point that the feds, probably the CIA, are involved and wants to get the heck out of Dodge. Surprisingly, he makes his exit intact. He gives you a bunker full of weapons and a bulletproof Hummer. Unfortunately, this is a one-time deal, and I turned away from the garage for a moment to park my car, and when I looked back, the Hummer was gone. Ugh. Speaking of disappearances, you head back to Donald Love's building, and neither he nor the elderly Asian gentleman are there. That's a wrap for Kyle MacLachlan, everyone. This leaves a fascinating story hook that is never resolved, as there were no 3D-era Grand Theft Auto games that take place after GTA 3 in the timeline. Again, the HD games were on a separate timeline. Oh yeah, I should mention the phone booth missions. There's a series from Marty from Bitching Dog Food called The Crook, the Thieves, the Wife, and the Lover. A bit of a left-field reference to the cult favorite Peter Greenaway film.
I eat in the best restaurants.
Georgina, try a little harder, please.
There's also some repeatable race missions, and a tough one you can do for the Yardies.
I want you to steal me some gang cars so we can do some naughty thing on our enemy turf. I want me a Mafia Sentinel, a Yakuza Stinger, and a Diablo Inferno so we can hit up any gang in Liberty. Drop them off at the garage in Newport and hear this. They're no use to me, all broke up now.
That was difficult just due to who you're stealing from. You're supposed to grab a Yakuza Stinger, easy peasy. There's always one by Asuka's apartment. Then a Diablo Stallion, basically a Mustang. Those are always driving around their territory in the red light district on Portland. And the tough one, a Mafia Sentinel, a sort of 5 Series Euro sedan. At this point, Mafia Mooks will gun you down on sight, so you have to chart a course very carefully to get one out of Portland and back to Staunton Island. Taking the tunnel is the best way to go. Asuka is, one mission aside, the final quest giver with her last set of 3 missions. Bait is a mission that I attempted to do a couple of times in what probably is the wrong manner. You're supposed to lead 3 cartel hit squads to a death trap for them by getting them to follow you to a warehouse in Shoreside Vale. What I was doing wrong was trying to string all 3 vehicles in a row behind me to get to the warehouse, which is technically possible but difficult, as they'll be firing out the windows of their cars at you and ramming you the entire time, and more than likely you'll explode. What I think you're supposed to do, I eventually figured out, is lead them one at a time to the kill zone. There's a forgettable run over espresso booths missions, and then finally, Sam.
Do we tighten it some more now or just wait for it to turn black and fall off?
Give it a quick prod.
Oh, what is that gooey yellow stuff? Oh, hey, Pave!
My handyman.
I was bored, so I came over to keep Asuka company.
She's got the makings of a natural, this girl. She's managed to extract this little gem from our guest. There's a plane coming into Francis International in 2 hours' time. It is full of Catalina's poison. You can avoid airport security by getting a boat out to the runway light buoys and shooting the plane down on its approach. Collect the cargo from the debris and stash it.
Oh, you be careful now, okay, baby?
Now try the chili oil.
We have to shoot down a Cessna-type dodo and retrieve its packages in a boat. You really do have to use the boats provided to you, because unless a mission requires navigating around chunks of the city, there's often trawl lines preventing you from boating around willy-nilly. So you grab a boat marked on the map, make your way down to the shoot point, and then manually shoot down a plane as it's on its descent to the Liberty City Airport runway. It's pretty easy to miss. If you hit it, the game tends to expect the plane to explode over the runway, meaning you'll have to deal with cartel folks on the runway and the FBI cars as soon as you head towards the exit via automobile. However, you may just be lucky enough to shoot over the water, which means you can just collect the packages and head back to the dock. A pro tip: If you do have to collect the packages over the runway, head back down to the very tip of it and there's a solitary cartel guy guarding a speedboat, a quick way to get back to shore. As shooting the dodo down will give you an immediate 4-star wanted level, trying to get back by land is the worst way. Helicopters will shoot you over water, but it's better than the constant barrage of suicidal police and military vehicles. I recommend you take something like a Hummer to the docks, anything that can survive the bullet storm you'll receive, trying just barely to get back to Asuka's new headquarters and cartel building projects. But, unfortunately, she's not looking too great when you get there. She's had an encounter with her katana, and Miguel is pretty dead too. Maria is being held for ransom by Catalina, and I guess the implication is that GTA guy, for some reason, is willing to pay the ransom to have her released? Either way, I haven't seen that kind of bravery since John Black drank the poisoned soup that Stefano made that would erase his memory on Days of Our Lives.
Your soup is getting cold.
John, don't do it. Don't let him take your memory from you. Don't let him do it.
I can give you everything you want, Stefano, and I will. If you let Marlena
go. Of course.
He's lying. Don't believe him. He's lying.
He has no choice, Marlena.
But we climb a step every day. Love lifts us up where we belong, where the eagles cry on a mountain high.
You head to her estate in Shoreside Vale, give up all your precious weapons, and pay her $500,000. Which you might have to do side quests, stunts, and find hidden packages to afford. And then this happens.
The real question is, did you turn up to rescue Maria or to get me back? Well, I got news for you. Shooting you will be a pleasure, but dating you was only business. You are muy pequeñito, amigo. Throw over the cash. You have been a busy boy, but you haven't learned. I'm not to be trusted. Kill the idiot!
Without any weapons except what you scrounge from dead cartel members, you have to fight your way out of the grounds and chase her helicopter. I remember being flummoxed, just absolutely flummoxed, by the final fight taking place on the big hydroelectric dam. Sadly, you don't have much time to grab a sniper rifle, though perhaps it is technically possible as there is a free one out in Shoreside Vale. Fortunately, about half the cartel mooks carry an assault rifle, which, while not having a zoom lens, at least lets you free aim. You have to very deliberately move your way through the dam, killing baddies just as you enter range, until you meet Maria. At this point, Carlita is making firebombing passes at you, and Resident Evil 1 style, there just happens to be a rocket launcher right there on the helicopter platform for you to make one final shot at your ex. She explodes, and cut to news reports about the gang war being suddenly over.
Residents in Cedar Grove have been coming to terms with the emotional aftermath of a full-blown war that hit the area yesterday. Local resident Clive Denver described to police a single gunman that he saw fleeing the scene with a dark-haired woman.
We're gonna have such fun, cause you know, I love you. I really do, cause you're such a big, strong man, and that's just what I need. Anyway, what was I saying? I forget, but you know what it's like, don't you?
Then, over credits, you hear from Maria about what dating is gonna be like, and this happens.
I broke a nail, and my hair is ruined. I mean, can you believe it? This one cost me $50.
Oh, problematic.
So why did Grand Theft Auto 3 become a major hit? Why did it hit so hard? Why was it good? To start with, and this is pretty obvious, because it's fun. As I said before, they already had the blueprint for how to make a fun game, but putting it into a polygonally rendered environment really makes it work, which was still new in terms of scale and in terms of perspective. There's a lot of novelty, especially in 2001, to walk around a city that feels living and breathing, and interacts back with you in entertaining mechanical manners. Driver 2 let you walk around cities, but there wasn't a lot to do, and it didn't feel good to do it. Just trying to get up a flight of stairs was a chore. Here, walking around is fun. Bumping into people is fun. They get annoyed, yell at you, maybe try to start a fight. Every type of pedestrian and driver has their own library of things they can say, both to themselves and to you. But movement is good. The cars have a surprising amount of physics to them. In my Drift VR video, I said that there wasn't much of the car movement, but them behaving like pivoting shopping carts in GTA 3, but I wasn't giving the game enough credit. Getting used to their handbrake turning takes a bit of time, but there are differences between models, and sliding vehicles around is a lot of fun. Driving physics would improve with San Andreas, but it's surprisingly good for a first 3D outing here in GTA 3. Moving around on foot, for the most part, is great too. They ditched tank controls and went for a screen-oriented directional movement, always for the best. Sure, there are a couple of moments where you're trying to grab a secret where you have to make some awkward jumps that don't feel great. And not having a right-stick camera look is a deficit that wouldn't be remedied until Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories on PS2. But overall, you'll have fun just walking around. The city is fun to explore. It's well designed, both to get around and to maximize space usage with plenty of nooks and crannies to explore. Initially, after an explosion took out the main bridge to Staunton Island, you're restricted to Brooklyn, the Bronx, I don't know. The stand-in for this area is Portland, which contains, obviously, the port, as well as Little Italy, Chinatown, and the red light district of Liberty City. Even within this third of the overall map, you've got so much to do. There's an elevated train system you can ride around, unique jumps you can find, hidden packages located on rooftops and odd corners of buildings, more advanced weapons that are geared towards the middle of the game, like the Molotov cocktail, rocket launcher, and shotgun can be found, as well as armor pickups that boost your defense, police bribe stars that reduce one wanted level, and adrenaline pills that slow down time, which I mostly grabbed by accident. The time slowing effect isn't really useful, and mostly is just annoying. There's a cleverness to level design too that is reflected in the missions. Like take for instance Sayonara Salvatore, where you have a very limited amount of time to assassinate the Mafia Don. There just happens to be a perfect sniper spot right across the street from where he'll show up. And it's never highlighted or painted in yellow. Heck, it never even tells you you should use the sniper rifle. But it just so happens there's an accessible roof with a perfect line of sight from him leaving Sex Club 7. I mentioned before secrets. There are 100 hidden packages to find, rampage missions, armor pickups, and more powerful weapons around the map. And almost every time you investigate a weird alleyway, secret tunnel, or pier, there's something to make the trip worthwhile. The super jumps are great too. These are unique jumps you can find around the map that give you a great slow motion view of your vehicle speeding through the air. For each package found, Mayhem Mission Complete or Super Jump completed correctly, you get an incrementally increasing reward, so by the end you're getting filthy rich doing these. Plus, the more hidden packages you find, the more weapons and armor you'll have for free at your save points. Rampage missions are a lot of fun, giving you one type of weapon with unlimited ammo and a time limit to kill as many of X as possible, usually vehicles or gang members. The problem is, of course, just staying alive long enough to hit the Rampage kill count target, as your wanted level will steadily increase as you go, as well as having irate gang members rush you. But it's way fun. This is something that the Saints Row games would take and run with. You can solve missions as creatively as you want, or you can pull a Mrs. Spiders and just hit everyone with your car.
Girls, get in, get in!
And the game often gives you a couple of different chances to take someone out, usually on foot and then in car if things go south. But like with the Take Out 3 Vans mission, you didn't have to use grenades as the game indicated. You can pile into them with heavy vehicles or knock them into water, whatever floats your boat, which is ironic because these trucks don't float. This really helps things from getting too frustrating, most of the time, because you can just figure out a completely different way of handling it. Different weapon, a different vehicle, a completely different approach. I just wish there had been landmines. This game really needs landmines. It also turns out if you pay attention to the plot, there's a through line happening, which I'm not sure I noticed playing it over the course of a few months back in 2002. The performances are well directed and no one sounds like they're sleepily phoning it in, rare for celebrity voiceovers in video games. I haven't even talked about the radio. While the selection of music is not up to later game standards, particularly Grand Theft Auto Vice City, whose enormous catalog of 80s classics made the soundtrack a phenomenon, and sparked renewed interest in bands like A Flock of Seagulls and Human League. It still has a depth and breadth that is surprising. Most prominent is the radio station Flashback FM, which consists almost entirely of tracks from the original Scarface soundtrack. Debbie Harry singing Buzz Buzz Get Me Yayo will be, for all time, associated with working my way through GTA 3. Each station has a DJ, which radio producer and writer Laszlo hired from real-life DJs.
It's time to shake it up with me, Tony, here on Flashback.
As well as hit-or-miss parody commercials.
Like a kitten. Have one delivered. Just log on to petsovernight.com and we'll send you a cute kitten overnight. Petsovernight.com, delivering little
Laszlo himself hosts Chatterbox FM, where they do the old Frasier trick of having celebrities calling in as one of Liberty City's insane listeners.
All-night mini-mart, and I've been watching myself on the video camera, and the camera me is doing things I don't approve of.
All right, hello, next caller. You're on Chatterbox.
I want to talk about that bang stuff. People say it's bad for you. It's not bad for you at all. Why aren't you talking? Oh, you think I'm strange? Am I on the air? Hello? Answer me, you pansy.
What's your question?
Bang! 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 Bang!
What about it? I mean, that's not really a question. Questions usually start with words like how and why, and they end with your voice going up like this.
Come on, Pete. I know where you work. You're just like all the rest.
How's that?
Alright, it's evil, dude.
Of course, the selection of celebrities here just happens to be the voice cast. Kyle MacLachlan, Michael Madsen, even the Mazar canon all have cameos. Back in 2002, for me, this was some of the funniest stuff I'd ever heard. Going back now, I still laugh, but it's definitely cemented in the 2002 era of shock humor.
Studio kind of forced him on.
Hey, you watch yourself, mister. And you, Janice, why you so ugly? Your husband, he don't make you happy?
No, he's an idiot and a jerk.
But he's probably a good daddy, and you sound very pretty. Angry, and a little bit of a know-it-all, but very pretty lady.
A huge part of the appeal for the game, though, is just loading it up, enabling cheats, and blowing stuff up after having a bad day at work, or class, or life. Many people who love the game will tell you they never actually spent much time doing the single-player campaign. They just wrecked shit. This game was built for it. So what did Grand Theft Auto 3 do wrong? First of all, we have to talk about the combat. For the original release, lock-on is presented with a faint red box around targets, and you can cycle between who you are aiming at. Most weapons have no free aim on PS2 and Xbox, so you're very dependent on the auto-targeting picking the correct enemy. It does not, seemingly picking whichever NPC is closest to the center of your aim, rather than, say, whoever is closest to you or actively attacking you. Ocarina of Time, this is not. On PC with the original trilogy, this is improved by all weapons having a free look with mouse and keyboard, though close quarters combat is still frantic and difficult to control. While you might just assign the blame to this being a 2001 game, remember that 2001 had some fantastic advances in play control. Halo on Xbox cemented how dual-stick gaming should work, Metal Gear Solid 2 had stylish action with complicated but tight controls, Max Payne on PC showed that first-person shooting could be stylish, intense, and playable even with a mouse and keyboard. The game breaks down a bit in cramped quarters, which might end up in while exploring or in combat. The camera does get easily snagged, and even my go-to top-down camera trick can be totally useless if there's an awning or bridge over your head. Also, there's a complete lack of checkpointing during missions, something that would really only get introduced in the HD era of the GTA games. When killed or arrested, you respawn with no weapons at either the closest police station or hospital, so you've either got to load your latest save or recollect whatever you'll be needing for the mission, especially armor. For some missions where having a specific loadout really does help, loading a prepared save will remove a bit of this frustration, but you'll still have to drive to the quest giver, skip through the cutscenes, drive to the mission destinations, etc. On hard missions, this can be really irritating. Oh yeah, let's talk about the sex worker thing. This was a huge scandal when the game came out, because yes, you can hire prostitutes, you can pay to get your health back, and if you so desire, you can murder them and then get some of your money back. I don't know if the amount of money you receive is supplemented by you having paid them, but this is definitely something you can do in the game. The way the sex is shown is juvenile, but in no way titillating or graphic. You just see the car you're in rocking. Everyone I knew at the time who had played this game, admittedly, this was all 20-something male nerds in 2002, tried it for the "I can't believe you can do this" factor. Even me. But in 2024, it didn't even occur to me to try this on this playthrough, because free health pickups are everywhere and it's kind of pointless. Oh yeah, you also get a slight health boost from hiring a sex worker, something that I didn't even notice until editing footage today, so there's that. This is the only way in the game to get above 100% health. Now, this sort of doofy sex joke is not uncommon in games. Look at Kratos in God of War. It's not shocking or even particularly interesting. Well, the game never tells you picking up prostitutes is something you can do. And I'm not even sure the kill the prostitute to get your money back idea was a specific programming feature beyond everyone you meet being able to be attacked. Violence against sex workers was a weirdly common punchline back in that era.
Oh, it's a big trunk. I'll show you right here.
Well, you got a dead hooker in the trunk.
What? No, it can't be.
Yes, it was. It was a dead hooker.
It wasn't a dead hooker!
Pal, I know a dead hooker when I see one.
What's happening? Hey, folks, come on down.
Hey, here's another dead hooker in this trunk.
What?
Oh, my goodness.
What are you doing?
I've never seen so many dead hookers in all my life.
Lord knows I have.
Violence against sex workers is real, and they are among the most at-risk group for homicide, especially queer and trans sex workers. It is worth noting the game doesn't encourage it, and really you do have to go out of your way to initiate the whole scenario. I think a lot more people now know about the terrible treatment of sex workers, and are less likely to find the whole setup funny or worth doing. If you're going to go ahead and comment that you love to use and kill sex workers in this game, I'm going to go ahead and say you probably should take a good long think about that and maybe talk to someone about it. For the joke at the end of the game that Maria talks too much and GTA guy kills her, that is way more of a problem for me. I imagine internet straw men telling me that it's ridiculous for me to find this in any way upsetting in a game where you literally kill thousands of people, and maybe from that perspective it is. But to me, it's just a gag on intimate partner violence and the kind of gross woman hating that I just don't like or even get. The treatment of women in GTA games has gone through all sorts of peaks and valleys over the years, with a high point in GTA 4 having queer woman quest giver, genuinely thoughtful and well-written female characters you could date or even just get to know, and a soft-spoken protagonist who treats them well. I haven't finished GTA 5, but I felt that it initially takes a nosedive with Michael's wife just being a mean caricature of a woman, and that the game assumes you sympathize with him, or at least get a chuckle out of his perspective. Reminds me of how I could just not understand Married with Children, with schlubby Al Bundy week after week seething with hatred over his charming wife played by one of the most beautiful women of all time.
Your paycheck is so small, we can't afford the luxuries of life.
G-Peg, is a shotgun considered a luxury?
Maybe. But unlike you, Al, a shotgun can go off more than once a month.
Well, if I had something worth stuffing, maybe I'd take my gun in the woods more often.
The weird misanthropy of Grand Theft Auto series did seem to grow with each iteration. Again, with the exception of 4, and that's always been a problem with me for the series. A writer and an essayist I really enjoy, Noah Caldwell-Gervais, has a good counterpoint that making the world and everyone in it so loathsome is better and kind of necessary for the game, since it gives you a guilt-free path to drive your fire truck straight through it without a care. That everyone sucks is a feature, and it makes the kind of sociopathic gameplay you engage with better and make more sense. He contrasts this with Watch Dogs 2, where the protagonist is genial and likable, but still able to do a terrorism. I'm not sure I entirely agree, but I think it's a fair point. And to the internet commenters who tell me you kill thousands of people in this game, why do you care? I'd say yeah, this is true, but I still do care about the kind of media I consume and the perspectives I'm exposed to, and it's always good to critically react and think about what you're ingesting from what you watch and what you play. I also want to take a moment to talk about the queer representation of this game. And yes, there is some. And no, given that it's a 2001 bro-y humor game, the representation is not fantastic. I mean, it's not terrible, it's just 2001. Basically, you've got the construction worker NPCs that wander around some areas of the city who will only speak in Village People lyrics. Also, right next to your first safe house, there does appear to be a gay bar named Fellas. Get it? The rear entrance? That means butt stuff. There's also a fudge packing joke. Now this might not make a lot of sense to say Gen Z viewers of this channel, but you see, back in the 1980s and 1990s, the straights thought it would be an amazing zinger to say gay men packed fudge because of butt stuff. And by fudge, they mean shit. Do you get it? And in this game, and please pause the video if you're going to have problems due to the amount of laughing you're doing, there's a company named Fudge that packs things. In conclusion, fudge is a terrible name for a food. As for bear spotting, there's pretty much only Tony in this game, well, and El Burro, who you never see, but does brag about the size of his junk in that one mission where you pick up pornography for him.
A gang of no-goods has threatened to remove my starring member if I don't pay them a cut.
And he does show up in loading screens. When it comes to the PlayStation 2 original versus the Xbox, there's pros and cons for each format. The PS2 version wasn't a graphical showstopper when it was released. Compared with what was coming out in 2001, you could definitely point to other games with much better levels of graphical detail and realism to their cities. Project Gotham Racing 1 and Shenmue both come to mind as examples of city rendering at its best. But I wouldn't call Grand Theft Auto 3 on PS2 ugly either. There's a surprising amount of work into small details, from the animation of pulling people out of their cars, to the varying times of day and weather effects. There's a cohesive sense of style to the character models, even in their hand-drawn looking faces and chunky fist glory, the design of cars, and the simple architecture of the city. Though there are loading points between each island, it still feels like one big city, and one this size is genuinely impressive for PS2 era hardware. Sure, Vice City would add a whole lot more visual effects and filters to it, and San Andreas even more so. And surprisingly, by the time San Andreas and the Stories games came out on PS2, they were also running a heck of a lot better. Still, this really was a hit out of the park for developers still cutting their teeth on 3D engines. Meanwhile, the Xbox version, released in 2003, has some advantages over the PS2 version. For one thing, brake and accelerator map to the triggers, which just feels more natural to play. Each vehicle is coated with real-time reflections of the environment around it, something that works well on the CRTs of the era, but the gamma levels just look kind of funky on most flat-panel LCD TVs now. I bet it looks totally fine on an OLED though. Some vehicles like these pickup trucks especially look kind of coated in Vaseline or something on lower contrast displays. Sadly, the right stick still only brings up side views or a first-person view from the character, not particularly useful unless you're doing a drive-by. It also has a better frame rate and, according to Digital Foundry, sharper textures. Though I haven't noticed much of a difference in my gaming on the texture front, I haven't spent any time analyzing them side by side. But due to the smoother frame rate and somewhat better controls, this was the version of choice for me for my full playthrough, and I don't regret it. Plus there's that old Xbox ability to seamlessly integrate custom soundtracks into the game. That just wouldn't happen now with all your DMCAs and other Metallica-related legislation. Using the Xbox dashboard, you could rip CDs and create playlists of music, like one per album or a whole long mix of your favorites. And this gets incorporated to the radio interface of the vehicles in GTA 3, allowing you to cycle through your playlists and songs. Obviously, this makes the game much better. The original release of Grand Theft Auto 3 on PC is its own beast. While delisted from online stores, you can still buy the original trilogy of PC ports direct from Rockstar, even if it doesn't show up on their launcher's store. As of the publication of this video, you can still Google Grand Theft Auto Original Trilogy and buy direct through the Rockstar website, and the game will still work without any patching, though you're on your own trying to figure out controller support. Personally, I don't think that running in HD or higher does the game any favors. The model seams and joints clearly show, giving this a weirdly PlayStation 1 era look to it that is obfuscated by the low resolution of the game on Xbox and PlayStation 2. The PC release also has the overly shiny look of the Xbox version that looks a bit off on LCD panels, but lacks its real-time reflections. The presentation of HD resolution shows the good and bad of the city texturing and draw distances, in some ways making the game look older than it is. On the other hand, it's a super smooth 60 frames per second, making moving around the map even better. As I've said before, the free aim controls on all weapons with mouse do help a lot. The sniper mission with 8-Ball and the cartel boat was a breeze. Finally, there's the Definitive Edition. This was released as part of the Definitive Edition trilogy by Grove Street Games in 2021. Well, folks hated it. It is a port of the current mobile phone versions of the games, and has completely rebuilt the combat and visuals, also now running on the Unreal Engine with a much more modern suite of rendering and lighting effects. Textures were mostly converted to high-definition versions via AI upscaling, with questionable results. In the almost 3 years since its release, the text errors have been tackled inconsistently. But stuff like this fresh mozzarella and pasta being converted into Irish mozzarella and pasta, with a change from custom painted, or maybe photographed in real life, awnings to just the cheapest looking font and artwork ever is kind of insulting to include in such a noteworthy game. Tell me more about these bear boxes though. With all the patches as up to August 2024, it's definitely playable. And while I do wish that the classic look and lighting was an option, weirdly, it is an option on the Netflix downloadable version of the trilogy on phones for all 3 games, was nowhere near as reliant on the PlayStation 2 graphical effects as either Vice City or San Andreas, both of which could have screen-filling filters and moody color grading. Please enjoy me trying to play this game with a touchscreen on a Samsung Fold 4 compared with the Series X version. Which look do you prefer? Everything here on Series X is very sharp and very neutral. That's not entirely a bad thing. I love the highly reflective and crisp HD look to the game. Kinda reminds me of jacking up the effects and detail in Midtown Madness 1 when I got a beefier PC, and the lighting effects can be great. It has, however, sadly axed the retro GTA 1 and 2 top-down mode, meaning that firefights are going to be tougher. On the plus side, all weapons now have a free aim mode, which does help making long-range shooting with any firearm much easier. Vehicles don't feel quite as loose as on PS2 or Xbox, and sadly the parking brake is back to RB, which is just my least favorite place for it. But you can still have some slidey fun. I remember running into an angry screaming YouTube guy reviewing the game who claimed that the trilogy was terrible because the characters looked too cartoonish, which, well, they always have? Personally, I've always interpreted the characters as being sort of polygon renders of the character art you see in the loading screens. That kind of English comic book style. Are the new models an improvement? They don't bug me, but let me know in the comments how you feel about the revised look. There are quality of life improvements too, though I have seen reviewers calling this a dumbing down of the game for babies. I don't know if I'd go that far. Now, you have a console-style weapon wheel on the controller, and missions have, holy crap, checkpoints. Don't get too excited, it'll bring you all the way back to the quest giver, but that's something. You keep your weapons, armor, and vehicle. On the other hand, you don't get to keep anything you earned in mission, including hidden packages or money from killing bad guys. So you may not always want to choose to restart, instead maybe continuing from the hospital or prison if you fail, so you can keep your progress that you may have made during a failed attempt. Auto-saving after a successful mission is a godsend, however. Can you go back? Are these games still fun? Early 3D open world games get a lot of flack, but I do think there's a magnificent amount of creativity and great design in how they built Liberty City. Even if you played through this back in the 2000s, 2 decades of iteration and streamlining controls, movement, driving, and shooting mean that old and new players wanting to go back and explore the series' roots will have to get used to a bit of jank no matter which version they choose. So which one should you play? I think that depends on what you're looking for. Retro gamers looking for a nostalgic kick will enjoy either console version, whether they want the classic look of the PlayStation with its streaky trails and bespoke color gradients, or the ultra shiny and smooth Xbox release. Personally, I'd go for the Xbox version just for the custom soundtrack and improved controls, but either is great. And for anyone wanting to play Grand Theft Auto 3 for the first time, I'm going to speak heresy and say that the Definitive Edition is the way to go if you want to play with a controller, or if you want to see the original with a new coat of graphical paint and like the Unreal Engine 4 look. But if you're a mouse and keyboard player, consider grabbing the PC Original trilogy instead. All that's left now is for me to apply mathematics to my analysis of the game, much in the style of Jeff Gerstmann and his science. Graphics, 3 Koobs. No matter what you play this on, Grand Theft Auto 3 is never a visual showstopper. It has a good sense of style and scope, but its simple character models, cars, and city were not pushing any visual boundaries. It's fine, but not why the game is a classic. Story, 4 Koobs. Surprisingly good after all these years. It's simple, but the performances are all around good and well directed, and there's some clever threading of its characters and plot points subtly through each mission, right from the start. The surrounding humor can be hit or miss, but Chatterbox FM, with Laszlo and his insane callers, holds up great. Still, the story is something they go deeper into in later titles, with voiced and developed protagonists, and ever-expanding scripts and scope. Open World, 5 Koobs. Now this is what the game does best. So far, this is the best open world we've seen on KOW, with the best use of its limited space and incredible design. Finding hidden packages is a delight. Secret missions unlocking at phone booths are fun. There's the rampages, the unique jumps, the car challenges. From the start, Rockstar nailed this. On foot, 3 Koobs. It's fine. There's a pleasing sense of control on foot, walking around feels natural, and the game doesn't give you too many confined areas to get hung up on. On the other hand, combat can be pretty dire when enemies get too close to you, and some of the platforming challenges can be a little frustrating. Driving, 4 Koobs. Surprisingly, out of the gate, DMA and Rockstar got this right, and it's better than I remember. Hitting the jumps is satisfying, as is plowing into cars with a fire truck. You're never fighting the controls in car, and that's what makes a good driving experience. Final score, 19 out of 25. Uh-oh. This is the first KOW tie. I'm going to rank GTA 3 slightly above Mercenaries. This is my personal tilt. I love Mercenaries, but GTA 3 just does so much right out of the gate. Still, GTA 3 doesn't knock Saints Row the Third out of first place, but this first 3D effort manages to exceed the Getaway and Driv 3R. Thanks for watching this video all the way through to the end. Please tell your friends, and give this video a big ol' click on the like button. Subscribe if you want more Koobert Opens Worlds, Bears and Games, racing game reviews, queer game history, and more. If you think you'd like to hear me talk about RPGs and other such story-heavy games, tell your podcast app to download the Square Roots podcast. You can hear me, Vanessa, Matt, and Jim play through your favorite games, a chunk at a time, like a book club. We've finished over 60 games now. Goodbye, and I love you. Platonically.
Alright, hello, you are on Chatterbox.
Hello, Laszlo. I'm a first-time caller. I recently moved to Liberty City from Hampshire in England.
Oh, really? How do you like it? I mean, is it hard to get used to the language? You speak English pretty good.
Oh, thank you, Laszlo. Yes, I do like it here. There's one thing, though, that's very different, rather worrying. When I was a boy in England, I had a nanny. She was very strict, Laszlo.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's excellent child care here in America, you know.
Well, I'm sure. But the thing is, Laszlo, when I was a naughty boy, I would get spanked. Nanny would spank me when I was naughty. And now Freddy needs Nanny, because when Freddy's naughty, he needs to get spanked.
Well, there's some child psychologists who probably say that spanking can be harmful to a child's emotional development.
Absolute rot, Laszlo. It's lovely. Freddy needs a nanny. He needs a nanny, Laszlo, because Freddy's been a very naughty boy.
How old is your son?
Excuse me?
How old is your son?
I don't have children. I can't stand the little brat. But Freddy needs a nanny.
All right, that's enough.
Oh.